All right, good evening. Welcome everybody to our Tuesday, October 3rd meeting. First, we have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, and then we'll move on to our regular meeting. I will have our city clerk do our roll call.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Howe.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen. Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Ratuja Indapure.
Here.
Councilmember Roisin O'Farrell.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'll remind everyone we do have individual mics, so just make sure we speak close and that the light is green so they can hear you and capture. So we will do our Pledge of Allegiance. Deputy Mayor Lamb, if you'll lead us. All right, Councilmember Stewart, will you do the land acknowledgement?
Thank you. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm texting Kent to see if he's coming. I'm sure he is. All right. Next up, we do have approval of the agenda. I will entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
All right, it's been moved.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, by 6-0, that passes. So first up, we're going to start with our joint meeting with the Planning Commission. And just a reminder to everyone, public comment actually falls after the joint meeting. And then we'll have a quick break and then come back and we'll start our regular meeting with the public comment. So am I passing this off to somebody? David? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. David
Yeah.
Pyle, Department of Community Development. First of all, I wanted to say that Ajay Chakrapani noticed us or provided notification that he'll be here a little bit late this evening. He apologized. He had something that came up and he won't be here till about 6:15. Tonight we're here with the Planning Commission and the Council, our annual joint meeting. We really appreciate you all working together and taking on some of these big issues that we have here at the city related to planning. We've got a big agenda for tonight and for the year ahead of us with our comprehensive plan update. We also have our critical areas update, which we have now kicked off, and we are in the midst of completing some background work, and we're here to present to you some of the findings of that work and give you some heads up on where we're going with the program and what our areas of focus will be. With us this evening is Avril Beatty from the Department of Community Development. We also have our consultant who is helping us with the project, the Watershed Company, are joining us virtually. I believe that we have Nell Lund and who's the other person? Apologies.
Alexandra Plum is my colleague, David.
Got it. Thanks, Nell. Yeah, I've not met her yet. Alexandra Plum from the Watershed Company. Thank you. Once the feedback is corrected, we'll be able to share screen and begin the presentation.
Echo. Share screen. This one. Hello. There's still a little bit of feedback, but I don't know if it's going to cause anyone a migraine. Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Avril Beatty. I'm the current Planning and Permit Center Manager in the Community Development Department. And we are here this evening to talk about the initiation of our critical area ordinance update. We're here to provide you a little bit of background and some overview on the process, on the scope of this update, the budget, and potential areas of special focus. As David Pyle mentioned, we have Watershed, which now has a slightly different name, DCG Watershed or something similar. And they're going to be here to present the draft scope that's being worked on currently, as well as going over the budget and answering any process questions that anybody has. So first, some background on the regulations. If I can get the computer to cooperate. Haha. So the critical areas are defined by both the state and by local ordinance. The state definitions, as you all can read, I'm not going to read them all to you, basically either covers sort of like habitat, stream areas, or geological hazard areas of various types. Those are also captured within our local definition. And the state allows cities to rename as they so choose, but you still have to make sure that that type of critical area protections are provided for within the local ordinance as it gets adopted. So the Growth Management Act requires that these regulations be updated on a regular basis. The intent is that you are preserving the natural environment, that you are protecting habitat for wildlife and fish, as well as local drinking water, as we get our water from aquifers up here. The intent is also to reduce risk to public health and safety within these geological hazard zones, where there can either be erosion or landslides or frequently flooded areas or even liquefaction. And so these all need to be have regulations that either protect the land itself or to protect the humans that are on that land. And as these regulations get adopted, they need to be based on best available sciences. And the acronym is BAS that you will see in written documentation as the process moves forward. BAS doesn't really roll off of my tongue, so I'll just keep saying best available sciences. So the deadline is set by the state regulations that these critical area ordinances get adopted. We are doing this in parallel with our comprehensive plan update. The idea being that you don't have one set of regulations or priorities or policies getting ahead of another one and potentially conflicting with each other. So we need everything to jive. So these are all going parallel with each other, keep everything cohesive. There is a Department of Commerce checklist that we have to follow. And part of that checklist includes following the best available sciences, which is what our consultant will make sure that we do. And then all of these get reviewed and ultimately approved by both the Department of Ecology as well as the Department of Commerce. So yes, this is a little redundant, bear with me. So as we are going to be reviewing the documents that the consultants are going to be going over this evening that are in draft form, these will be available to the public once we finish polishing up a little bit. And ultimately, all of this work needs to be done by end of December 2024, so we have something ready to go in place by January 1st, 2025. So we are just kicking off this process now. There's leaving us lots of time for public outreach, lots of time to get feedback on the best available science approaches that we are going to be taking with the consultant, and allowing for outreach and for allowing to reach out to both the Planning Commission and the City Council and the public, because we are crowdsourcing all of this, and the more input we can get from everybody, the better. So now I'm going to hand it off.
If I could jump in just
yes.
for 1 second, if you could back up a couple slides, I want to make one point here. So areas of special focus. So over the past few years, we've been paying attention to public comment and letters and public comment on projects and areas that are challenging for our staff to implement. And this list of areas of special focus comes from the years of collecting feedback And these are areas we find that will be highly valuable for us to focus on amending our policies and regulations. And if you have questions about any one of these, we're happy to provide feedback or some background on why this made the list. There's quite a bit here, and we're really excited to take these on.
Can I ask a quick question since we're here? I really like that we have accounting for climate change here. And so I was just wondering, is that something that came through public comment, or was that part of when we had the citizen advisory group? Did it come through that? And would love to see more in the presentation as well.
That did come from public comment. It also comes from state requirements, given that critical areas are very susceptible to irreversible harm if we don't address how we handle that in advance. You know, heavier rainstorms, bigger windstorms, erosion, those kind of things.
Thanks.
I would also just like to add that these areas of special focus are something that can be above and beyond the standard critical area ordinance update. So any deep dives that we want to do into any of these, any rabbit holes, do cost more money. So it is something that we have to keep in mind as we move forward. And now I will hand it off to Nell with Watershed. Nell Lund, are you able to see screen?
I am, yes. Thanks, Avril and David. Happy to speak with the City Council and Planning Commission about this update process. We're excited. Our firm and I personally have worked in Sammamish for many years now, and have become familiar with really the rich natural resources that you have in the city. So this is a privilege to be involved. So the existing conditions report is our first look at the city, just to make sure that we're putting our best available science review into the context that is most applicable to the city of Sammamish. So we like to first look at, what are the resources in Sammamish, and how are you presently mapping them as part of your regulatory process to protect critical areas. So as all of you are probably well aware, the city has many wetlands throughout. You have a total of 837 acres of wetlands that are mapped, and I'm sure that's an underestimate. And also in Sammamish, you have some really rare bog wetland ecosystems, including Queen's Bog at Lahani Park. And then the fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, as you know, include streams, lakes, priority habitats and species. For your streams in Sammamish, one of your key considerations are kokanee salmon, but of course, as part of the standard and required protection of critical areas, we need to give priority to anadromous fish. So several of the streams in the city also have listed species such as Chinook and bull trout and steelhead that need to be protected. And then you have some lakes in the city that some of you may be aware there. A few of them have additional regulations due to phosphorus, high phosphorus concentrations and potential pollutants, like Beaver Lake and Pine Lake. And then priority habitats, protecting those species is often done through maintaining those biodiversity areas and corridors. Next slide. And then rounding out the list of critical areas under the WAC and the Growth Management Act, we also have critical aquifer recharge areas, which Avril mentioned are important for your drinking water and for just contributing to healthy groundwater conditions throughout the region. And then frequently flooded areas, which in Sammamish are largely concentrated along Evans Creek in the Evans Creek Preserve area, and then a little bit along the Lake Sammamish shoreline is also mapped. although I know the levels there are controlled somewhat, so that's relatively minimal. And then geologic hazard areas, being up on the plateau above Lake Sammamish, there's quite a bit of elevation gain in the city and a lot of steep slopes and associated landslide hazards and erosion hazards and seismic hazards. So we want to take all those into account as we move ahead with the CAO update. Next slide. So the Best Available Science Report focuses on a quick summary of some of the key points for each of those protected critical areas. We look at, the definitions and the functions and values and protective measures. And something I didn't highlight in these slides, but we've also considered the additional climate change stressors on each critical area type and different steps that can be taken to improve resiliency of maintaining the functions and values of those critical areas in the face of climate change. So I just gave a quick summary here of functions and values of the five main critical areas. You may be aware, wetlands are well known for providing water quality and water storage, and flow desynchronization, which is a really highly valued function of wetlands. It also helps provide clean, cool water to streams in summer, which will likely be even more critical in the face of climate change. CARAs obviously recharge groundwater and help maintain that source for drinking water where needed. And fish and wildlife habitat areas, they provide microclimate, which is valuable for maintaining healthy stream temperatures and corridors that are viable for wildlife in the area. And fish and wildlife habitat conservations are where we get to take a step back and look a bit more at landscape scale processes like large woody debris recruitment and some of those habitat corridor functions. And then frequently flooded areas and geologic hazard areas both have some natural dynamic processes that have ecosystem benefits, but they are largely managed for public safety. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we focus on as we're helping the city make updates to their code is what are the current protective measures that are employed for these various critical areas based on current best available science. So I kind of grouped some of the key ones here. For wetlands and streams or fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, really the key is to encourage people to avoid direct impacts. And then when there is an impact that's unavoidable, to require compensatory mitigation to ensure those functions and values are maintained. And additionally, to encourage, voluntary restoration or stewardship where that can be implemented. The best available science currently emphasizes native, densely vegetated buffers that are clearly marked and protected, the importance of wildlife corridors, and the importance of using adaptive management to make sure that, project where mitigation was approved, where that is successful and achieves its stated goals. And then for flooded areas, frequently flooded areas, CARs, and geologic hazards, again, as I mentioned earlier, public safety is a focus. And looking ahead to climate change stressors where, precipitation patterns are projected to change, more flashy urban hydrology can occur, and that can overwhelm infrastructure and possibly cause pollutants to run up into streams, as an example. So looking at those stressors and making sure that infrastructure is sized appropriately to handle those projected changes. And I will pass it to you, Alexandra.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Plum. Could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. So why we're updating the critical area ordinances for consistency with the state mandate, which requires under the Growth Management Act that you complete a periodic update of the existing critical area ordinance, and also to improve management and implementation of regulations to better protect critical areas. While the current regulations are thorough and were previously updated to reflect the most recent state regulations and guidelines at that time, the current ordinance would need to be updated for consistency with best available science, for clarity and organization, for consistency with state WACs or RCWs, and to incorporate climate change. So the topics that we focused on in the gap analysis really evaluated the existing code and addressed areas that could be improved or needed to be updated to meet best available science. So those areas that we're focusing on included wetlands. Largely that area included updates to management tools to better match best available science, and also included review and updates of the existing buffer and mitigation requirements as recommended in the most recent Department of Ecology publication. For the fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, we recommended considering adding a list of species of local importance to better improve the implementation and protection of those species, and then also to support habitat corridor goals with mapping. A large portion of that section included review and recommendations for incorporating the WDFW's riparian management zone guidance, which also includes use of the site potential tree height at 200 years. For geologic hazard areas, we mostly recommended minor updates for consistency with best available science, and then some reorganization for clarity. And then lastly, for critical aquifer recharge areas, we also included some minor updates for consistency with BAS, and then for clarity of application.
So as shown, we have a plethora of public meeting dates and opportunities for getting public input and presenting information as we have it, as it gets developed to the public. Are there any questions about any of these dates or events? Okay. So next steps, there have been 3 documents that are currently being prepared by Watershed. The existing conditions report, the best available sciences report, and then the gap analysis. And each one feeds into the other. And as soon as we have these done, we will get these posted on our website. If anybody did any rock painting at the block party, you would have a QR code to that website at the bottom, if you have it. And then there will continue to be stakeholder meetings, either with groups or with individuals or with organizations as necessary, as desired. And we're looking forward to getting all of that feedback. Any other questions?
My guess is there's a question on an estimate of when those will be available.
We are thinking that and Nell can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on this. We're hoping to have the reports finished up within the next week or so, and ideally posted by the end of next week.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I just have a quick question. What's the definition of a landslide?
That's an excellent question, and one that we are going to be re-examining as part of this update. Does that not answer your question? Any other questions I cannot answer?
Real. So one comment I wanted to make is I didn't really see it in the overall plan, but I hope that our outreach plan will in some way focus on people that are impacted by any changes that we intend to make. You said stakeholders, and there's a lot of stuff in here about public, but this is one of those areas that may not get a ton of attention, and it would be easy for us to blindly make some kind of a change along the way in the process and fail to recognize that it affects somebody in particular. And I hope that this plan that's developing keeps an eye out for that, so that the people that are actually impacted are not surprised. We get the opportunity to build collaboration if we do make changes early, rather than surprise somebody later.
We completely agree, and we are going to be doing everything we can to get people aware of the regulations that could potentially affect them and try to have things clear instead of having one big bucket of new regs that then someone has to sort through because they know they're in a landslide hazard area, but they don't have any wetlands. We don't want someone to have to swim through all of that. We're going to try our best to keep things organized so someone can focus in on the things that might pertain most to them.
Yeah, I guess, just to be clear, what I'm thinking about is, and I make something up as an example, right? If we changed a buffer zone around Evans Creek from 20 feet on either side to 50 feet on either side, and that affects 20 property owners that are right there, we should definitely make the proactive effort to contact them and involve them in the process. Now, if in the end, what we're doing is all mandated and nothing out of the box, then it's probably not much of an issue, but it just feels like one of those under the radar amidst all of the other things that we're going to be doing, comp plan update, on and on and on. And then somebody who's a property owner or a resident or something gets surprised because something changed. So the intentionality of looking at this kind of a picture and saying, here's who's affected, we specifically need to contact them. That's something I would really encourage be part of the plan right up front.
We'll see what we can do. Do you want to
If I
comment?
could jump in on this. So my understanding is, and Nell can correct me where I'm wrong, is we've made it through the sort of expansion component of critical areas in years past, where buffers were getting bigger, larger areas were being regulated, and now we're looking more at how those areas are regulated and fine-tuning the regulation and the tools that we have to get better outcomes. So I don't think that there are those big pushes to make the buffers bigger again. I think it's more along the lines of how we're managing within those established areas.
Yeah, my
I
example
will
is-
jump in on that, David, because I know we have more discussion about WDFW's recommendations on fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, but they are recommending increases in protection areas. They're calling it riparian management zone in their best available science review. And then some of the wetland buffer regulations have also, the recommendations are a bit different today. Mainly, I think that's due to the focus on the buffer width being presumed to be densely vegetated with native plants at the stated standard buffer width. So the old practice of reducing that buffer width by enhancing a degraded buffer is really no longer best available science. Those are two items that stand out, but we'll have more discussion about that as we review the gap analysis together.
Thank you.
So I would just say my intent, was not to drag us into any kind of wetland weedy details or anything like that. It was, yeah. It was just to point out that in this particular case, there can be very specific people that can be specifically affected, and the rest of us might not even catch on or realize it. So we need to pay closer attention to that, whatever the issues might be. And maybe there'll be none, I hope so, but we should pay attention to that.
Councilmember Howe?
It's a process question. So I just want to understand that what we're doing here, if I understand it correctly, is refining where we're operationally where we're supposed to be with critical areas. But I also wondered how that intersected with King County, for example. I wanted to understand, is there anything that we're doing that in any way is contrary or different than the way King County is approaching it. The reason why I'm asking has to do with a road that's just above the Gray Barn, which floods continually. Well, there'll never be funding in King County to fix that road, ever. But I do wonder how much of an impact we create from the plateau, of water cascading down onto that road. So I'm trying to just have just a little better understanding of just how well do we play with our neighbors, how well does our policy in this plan intersect, and is there oversight for that, or is that already just taken into account automatically? Because you guys are so smart.
That's a fascinating question, and I can see David's gears turning.
It's one we'll put a pin in for sure and look at. I know that, with management of water courses or aquatic resources, you do need to sort of remove the jurisdictional boundaries, so to speak, to ensure the best success. So collaboration across jurisdictions is always really important in the management of aquatic resources. But it's a really good question, and we'll in addition to the other one about outreach, we'll definitely make sure to come back with those.
Anyone else? Yeah, Deputy Mayor Lamb.
So this is for David Pyle. We had talked a while back about wetland banking, and I don't know if that's part of this conversation or another conversation.
It definitely is part of the critical areas update. The city does currently allow as a last resource the use of a wetland bank when you cannot first replace in-kind on site, and you cannot replace in-kind in the same watershed. You're allowed to go to a bank. There are certain circumstances where a bank is really beneficial as compared to trying to create some enhancement that really wouldn't be cumulatively a benefit to the system. So the question is, how much effort do we want to put into studying that? We'd have to create our own bank if we wanted to do it locally, or if you wanted to export the green space to another bank, then you could do that. It is seen as something by the Army Corps and the State Department of Fish and Wildlife and Ecology as acceptable for us to do. But really, it's a local control thing, and what is the right approach that you want to take?
So do we have a bank, so to speak?
We do not have a bank within the city limits. There are banks very close to city limits in King County that some of our applicants use when they do not have mitigation opportunities on site. Mm-hmm. However, for us to create a bank would take some initial input, and it's actually a program we'd have to start up. So we need to know about that and budget for that and set a work plan in place.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Great. Is that it? Are you already done?
I'm done if you're done.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Nell and Alexandra. All right. Next up, the Town Center Plan and Development Regulation updates relating to the comp plan update.
Mayor, before David jumps in, if I could really quickly, I just want to let everyone know that there are, for the participants, there are some snacks and water over here. Feel free to jump up at any point in time and avail yourself, just to make sure we're all staying attentive and and engaged.
Thank you. All right, David.
All right, good evening. David Pyle, Department of Community Development. Tonight, our second agenda item with the joint meeting is a discussion of the status of the city's comprehensive plan update and a consideration around inclusion of additional study on the city's town center. We'll be doing a brief background. We'll be updating you on some important components and terminology that's included with the comprehensive plan update scope of work. We'll be talking about the proposed town center scope of work, and we'll then look to the council and commission for some direction and provide some next steps. Just a recap from the agenda bill, the purpose is to receive direction from the City Council and Planning Commission on the proposed approach for updating the town center plan and associated development regulations as it relates to the land use and housing strategy for the comprehensive plan update. We're kind of at a critical point in the comp plan update, and we want some feedback from you all as to whether we should expand the scope and look more deeply into the town center, or whether we should continue on with the path we're on, which we do have a compliance strategy that we could achieve certification under without a deep dive into the town center regulations. First of all, some terminology and some really important pieces to consider. Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2050 puts the city in the cities and towns geography category. This is really important because this drives the amount of growth that the city is slated to receive under PSRC's Vision 2050. And it also sets the distribution of growth amongst the 19 cities in the cities and towns category according to the King County countywide planning policies growth targets. So the next is the King County urban growth capacity, city land capacity. And what this is a study that was done back in 2019 that evaluated how much land capacity the city had following King County guidance. And ultimately, we had an output on a certain number of units, and that number of units was carried forward into the growth target setting process. The town center FEIS capacity, this is another important point for consideration. This is the 2,000 units that was studied under the preferred alternative for the town center that we see as a cap. And if we want to change that, there's a process to do that. The King County Countywide Planning Policies Growth Management Act growth target. This is set by King County working with the cities, so the cities and towns group under the PSRC Vision 2050 geography group met in a caucus and negotiated growth targets that ultimately ended up in the city setting our growth target in relationship with those cities and was ultimately adopted as a CPP, a King County Countywide Planning Policy, just recently, earlier this year. The next is the King County Countywide Planning Policy Housing Policy Framework. This is really important because King County recently, as part of the King County Countywide Planning Policies, made some major changes to policy language and direction, and cities are required to be in conformance with the policy direction that is set by the county. An additional step in our comprehensive plan update this year, we have to take our land use and housing elements and send those off to King County, where King County staff and the King County Affordable Housing Committee review our housing element and provide feedback on that. That feedback is also considered by the Puget Sound Regional Council, excuse me, in their certification of our comprehensive plan. So it's an additional layer of review, and we will be providing them a copy of our public release draft when it is available sometime probably in the spring or early summer in 2024. The next is the housing allocation. This is another really important piece of the puzzle here. This is the allocation that we were given by King County under House Bill 1220, passed in 2021. What that bill said was that the state was to provide an estimated house need or housing need statewide, and the state was to break it down by region and county. Then the counties were to disaggregate that down to the city level. And the numbers that we received have been provided to you previously. We were provided a fairly large number in the 0 to 30 and 30 to 50 area median income categories. Happy to provide those specific numbers if you want them again. The comprehensive plan, land use and housing elements, these are under the city's control. This basically is the guidebook as to how we are going to provide housing in the city and growth in the city, where it will go, how it all fits together. This ultimately is reviewed again by King County, who provides feedback to us, and by Commerce, who also provides feedback to us, and then ultimately is reviewed by PSRC, and if they find us to be in compliance with all the requirements for a comprehensive plan, they grant certification of our comprehensive plan. If we're not in compliance, they send it back to us and ask for corrections. The next is the comprehensive plan certification. That was what I was just talking to. So, yep, there it is.
There'll be a test after this, so I hope everyone took good notes.
These are all very important points of discussion that help frame what we're working on. So we wanted to make sure you were aware of all these things that are out there providing bookends and bumpers for our conversations. I think land use and housing is a complex topic, and it's even more complex with this comprehensive plan update cycle than it's ever been in the past. There's been multiple policy meetings, changes in legislation and guidance since 2019. We've participated in many regional forums, and we have some lessons learned on specific feedback, and specific feedback that's been given to us. The biggest takeaways: deeper affordable unit capacity must be mid-rise. So we need to show that we have capacity for, or to accommodate the housing allocation that we have been given by King County through King County countywide planning policies in mid-rise. The comprehensive plan land use and housing element must plan for, accommodate, and remove barriers to the delivery of affordable units. We need to comprehensively go through our policies and our zoning controls and our permit system and make sure that we are not providing or presenting a barrier to the delivery of these units. We do not need to show a funding source. This is a really interesting one, and it makes it a bit challenging to understand how this all fits together. Really, we have to show that we have the capacity for these units and the framework for them to be delivered, but we don't have to demonstrate how they will be funded or actually built. We must plan for our growth target. This again provides some tension because our growth target of 2,100 units actually matches our housing allocation of 2,100 units, and a majority of our housing allocation number is in the deeply affordable units. So the tension there is that if market rate units continue to be delivered, then it takes away from our capacity to provide the deeper affordable units. But we've been given very specific feedback that our comprehensive plan must show that it is calibrated around our growth target of 2,100 units. We also have been given specific feedback that we may not add capacity out of alignment with our growth target. The challenge there is that we're hearing through forums that in order to incentivize and reasonably show that you could provide deeply affordable units, there needs to be a market unit match that goes along with that provides the incentive to actually see those units delivered. There are other strategies that we're working on and looking at around how to deliver the more deeper affordable units in mid-rise that do not also require that level of incentive in market units. So we'll jump into the comprehensive plan for a minute before getting into the town center. We're going to provide an overview of the current scope of work.
David, are you looking for questions as we go? Because I see Councilmember Andapore's stand up, or do you want to hold them?
I'd be happy to take questions.
Okay.
Thanks. So a quick question around the showing the deeper affordable unit capacity to be mid-rise. So do we have to show at a particular ratio the market rate units to the affordability units? Has that been a discussion in the forums? And is there a formula to that in particular cities?
So we've asked the question of what is the secret formula that makes it work, and everyone has a different answer. So there's not a lot of guidance there. There isn't a lot of research on that either. We've been looking for that. Our consultant's been helping us. We've reached out to MRSC, PSRC, and they have ideas about what is the best fit, but we're not coming up with a real concrete number that's been thoroughly studied and tested. So the second part of your question is we are not required to show how it's funded or how it's necessarily incentivized. However, we do take this very seriously. We do want to do a good job, and we do want to actually have a framework that will deliver housing, and that where we actually would see some units come out of the ground and be built, as opposed to going through an exercise just because. So we're presented with this situation where we could take an easy road. I would call it's never easy, but a more straightforward path where we simply show the zone capacity, we simply show the regulations that we have that don't present a barrier, and we simply show how the math could work if funding was magically to appear and it was the land was available, that the units could be built. That is, I think, is the minimum level of commitment that a city has to make and show. However, we're interested in understanding from the council and the commission what additional things we can do to do a better job and really show that we're trying to not only just accommodate it in the city, but actually see that it be delivered. Looking for more questions. And if I don't see anybody's card up, Scott will let me know. Jumping into the comprehensive plan. Again, the comprehensive plan, land use and housing element should be aligned with King County countywide planning policies and the assigned growth target. The challenge here is that our growth target is 2,100 units and our housing allocation is 2,100 units. What you're not seeing here, in addition to this number, is the 401 units of emergency transitional housing that are not part of the housing allocation specifically, but that we must show capacity for 401 units of emergency transitional housing. The easy way to think about that, and what we've learned from the conversations regionally, is that if you have enough zone capacity for hotels to accommodate that, then you have enough zone capacity for emergency transitional housing. Thinking of emergency transitional housing like a hotel. However, you do need to look into the regulations to ensure that there is not a barrier to emergency transitional housing being built specifically. For example, you couldn't allow a hotel but not allow a shelter. So you can see here, this presents the tension, and one of the things that all the cities that we talk to are in the same position we're in. They're trying to figure out the relationship between their growth target and their affordable housing allocation. They're also trying to understand the relationship between those two numbers and their land capacity. And they're trying to understand the limitations on what they can do to turn up land capacity in order to show that they're accommodating the housing allocation. And we've been told that there is a limit on that it cannot be out of alignment with your growth target. And what they don't want is for you to show that in order to achieve your 499 0 to 30% PSH, that you're providing a 10-to-1 ratio of market units, and therefore you are now in the range of, be 5,500 units, just in the 0 to 30, right? That is, so you'd be taking on a new target, something along like that, and needing to change the numbers in order to accommodate that. That's the thing that they're guarding against, is they don't want to see cities doing that. What they say is it throws off the regional planning balance.
David, can I maybe this is helpful, and I know we talked about this a little bit, but in some ways to separate out those two pieces, I think if I were, in my mind, the way it makes sense is that the housing target is a ceiling, and the low income target is more of a floor, if that makes sense. They just happen to meet each other exactly at the same number. And so when we talk about these two pieces, they're really separate actions, but they put us in, as David said, they put us in pretty restrictive bumpers. And so really the challenge is, how do we try to accommodate both of those pieces within what we currently have and how we plan moving forward?
Okay, well, I think my question is around the fact that we know that while these are targets and goals, we know that there's no teeth attached to these at this point. So whether we comply or don't comply, I don't know that there's a heavy burden or a slap on the wrist that actually gets slammed with the city. I'm not saying that this isn't why I'm not saying that that's something to consider. It's more just that it's such a squishy thing that we weren't given the funding to do this kind of work. So as we look to ways to make this actually function, do we even remotely consider that maybe in 5 years there's an option that we will get some kind of funding from the government? Or do we just pretend, or just maybe not pretend, but know in our hearts we're not going to get funding out of the government? And so whatever framework we come up with is exclusive of any guidance or help financially from government resources. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair, and I think it's the conundrum we're all facing. We are required in 2029 to report on our housing what we've produced, how many of those are affordable housing. And that goes to Commerce. And they're going to look at these numbers and they're going to give us a report card and they're going to say, did you deliver on what your allocation was to a certain point? And, you know, and if they're not happy with what we've produced, they could come back and say, hey, you need to relook at your policies and your development regulations to maybe remove barriers or look at other ways of achieving that affordable housing. What's a problem is the 0 to 30%. That's almost like an unfunded mandate because you're incentivizing 0 to 30% AMI housing is nearly impossible. And it's really hard to do that within our development regulations. So I am hopeful in the next legislative session, we're going to start seeing funding for this type of housing. So this would absolutely be a priority for our lobbyists with the next legislative session because, again, a majority of our affordable housing allocation is at 0 to 30, 0 to 50. So we can definitely deliver 50 to 80%. Actually, we do a fantastic job of doing that. We have probably one of the most successful inclusionary zoning codes in the region that produces affordable housing. So that's a pat on our back. It's when you get below the 50%, it's going to be a struggle. I think this is also going to be a moment for our regional partners, our state, county partners to take a look at some of these mandates and maybe do some lessons learned themselves. And hopefully with the next comp plan, we could do a little bit better and making sure we're not having some of these conflicts. And again, this is not just the city having a challenge here. It is a lot of the cities within our region. And what I am hearing is actually cities want to produce affordable housing, but there needs to be some funding that comes down to help with that. So,
Kelly, I had a follow-up question. So when you said we do really good with the 50 to 80% AMI, is that through the policies that we have, like, for example, in the town center?
yep, and I can't really wait to present that part of the presentation.
Great.
to go
I
through
teed
that.
you
But
up
yeah,
really well there.
right.
And my second question is for you, you know, the emergency transitional housing, does that overlap with the 0 to 30% AMI? Like, can that be the same, or is that something completely different?
It's separate. Yeah, there's the three categories at the lower income range. There's the permanent, there's the emergency transitional, which is really people coming out of homelessness, for example, or that have had some shock in their life that has put them in a situation where they need emergency housing. There's the 0 to 30 permanent supportive. Think of that as programmed housing, where there's services in the building. I think there's the Together Center down in Redmond that was just built. If you haven't been there, I was down there the other day. Fabulous development, really amazing. What could be? It would, help us understand what could be. Then there's the 0 to 30, which is really just it's income restricted housing that offers a place for people to live that may be in a lower income position that just need housing. Then it goes up, from there. And it's interesting that some cities, if you look at there's a King County dashboard. It's a Tableau. If you Google King County Affordable Housing Tableau, it'll pop up there for you. So that's how I find it. And you can see what all the cities were given in terms of their allocations. And some cities were given virtually 0 units in the 0 to 30, very few in the 30 to 50. For example, SeaTac received a fairly high number in the 100 to 120, but a fairly low number in the 0 to 30. So it's because of the existing supply and the different opportunities that exist in that community. And what they're looking to do is add opportunities for all income ranges in all the cities. And that's a really important component of the King County countywide planning policies. Housing elements is, if you read through those, you'll see that there's a theme around making sure there's opportunities for different income groups in all cities in King County.
Right. So again, to go back to my question, the 2,100 units does not include the 401 that we have to allocate.
It does not.
Great, thanks.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone answered Councilmember Howe's question about the teeth, and I think, if I understand correctly, there's one set of teeth, which is our comp plan wouldn't be approved if we don't kind of do that, and that would be bad. There's also, if we're not compliant with the Growth Management Act, we've been down that road, and there are teeth. We just really like to avoid it. And then I guess the third thing I just want to point out is that, I mean, David, you kind of talked about we could do a perfunctory job and we could show some macro math that says we have capacity to build 2,100 units, we're done, but they're not really necessarily going to yield many or any affordable units. And I just want to say that beyond teeth, like, do we only do things if there's a threat of us getting in trouble if we don't? Or should we do it because we're talking about people's lives? These are people who, most of them have jobs and are working and have nowhere to live. These are people that we potentially rely on every day to make our lives better, and they just need a place to live. So I just want to throw that out there, that I don't know that we should only do things because if we don't, we'll get in trouble. I think sometimes we should do things because it's the right thing to do. Thanks.
I'd like to respond to that for a second. So don't misunderstand my comment. So when I say teeth, I mean every city is in the same struggle that we are in. We have an unfunded mandate. Every city is in this mess. So when I am talking about that, that's specifically what I'm referencing, is the fact that each city, at the end of 5 years, when we look at our stuff, we're going to go, wow, I mean, this is where our gaps are, and they could be mighty and enormous. And we're going to need a lot of help from our government allies to try to pull something together. I certainly never inferred.
I could add, though, that if I could, I was going to go back to this list of bumpers here. And one thing to keep in mind is that we will have to send our public release draft to King County to be reviewed by the King County Growth Management Planning Council Affordable Housing Committee, and they will be providing comment on that. We've got a preview of that. Redmond has sent theirs off and just recently received quite a bit of feedback from the county on theirs. And it's going to be really, important for us to keep that in mind. We're going to watch all of the cities as they progress through that process. We don't want to be first. We don't want to be last. But we're really going to learn from the feedback that they're getting. And we have also heard that PSRC does plan to take that commentary very seriously in review and certification of comprehensive plans. So what I'm meaning to say by this is that if we are choosing to steer outside of our lane as a city and bounce over the bumpers, we're going to be put back in the bumpers. So that's a really important thing to remember for everybody out there listening. I know everyone has a different vision about how this might work out, but we're really constrained by those bumpers in this process. Councilmember Trine.
Yeah, to follow up on that, David, the Affordable Housing Authority is definitely in the position where they want to help the cities. So it's not about punishment or, hey, you're doing this wrong. You have to remember this is new, and I think Councilmember Howe is correct. Everyone is dealing with this, and so it's about how. I agree, David. We don't want to be the last ones in, but we definitely want to get ours in so that we can get the help from them, and so that when it does move forward, that it does get certified, and that we actually are. And I think the city, in the past, historically speaking, we have stepped up and done some pretty cool things to address the affordable housing issue. And so I think if we can put some of those historical elements in again and duplicate what we've done in the past, I think the Affordable Housing Authority is going to look on that as super positive. It may not be the numbers that they want us to do, this 900, 1,000, 2,100, right? But, even trying to hit 1,000 to me seems like a daunting task. But if we can show that we're making progress in 5 years, even without funding, what would we be able to do with funding? And then we're in a position of strength as a city going forward to meet the goals that they're asking us to meet. And I compliment you guys on your, I know we're threading a really fine needle because that gap, the house and the floor, or the floor and the ceiling is the same. So good. Keep moving forward.
Thank you. And if I could highlight one of the points you made is the timing of everything is really important, and you'll hear a little more about that later. When we say there are constraints in the process related to the timeline, it is because we need to be turning in documents like our housing element to King County for review with adequate time to get comment and incorporate that and have community discussion around that.
And can I follow? Is that? And then that is that also? I mean, how High Planning Commission, but it's coming to you guys. That's part of the process, right? That we have to follow, and that timing has to be in lockstep so that we're not the last ones to the game.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
I still have the mic, so going on. So getting into so when I said we have a current strategy to achieve compliance that does not require a deep dive into the town center and looks citywide at the current zoning structure, I'm going to go through that here. The first is mid-rise housing. And what we would be doing is updating the land use tables in the town center, mixed-use centers, and what we're calling the bonus parcels to accommodate mid-rise. Bonus parcels are either religious-owned, public-owned, or otherwise available land where you could easily see mid-rise be built and provide a fairly large number of affordable units in the more deeply affordable ranges, and where if there was funding available, it could probably be delivered pretty quickly. So publicly owned land, for example, is the city could allow some of its property to be redeveloped to accommodate affordable housing. King County could redevelop the park and ride at Pine Lake with affordable housing, the Thornton Place example. Workforce housing could be developed on property owned by Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District. I know I've received communications in years past from them of interest in working with the city to try and provide some workforce housing. Privately owned land, a religious institution could develop affordable housing on its property. A landowner could donate land to Arch or a similar organization, and affordable housing could be developed there. An affordable housing developer could purchase or donate property in Sammamish as well. Inclusionary zoning, I want to go back to the privately owned land and the publicly owned land. Those are what we call the bonus parcels. And the idea there is that we could rezone or create an overlay on a series of parcels in the city that could increase the capacity for really 0 to 30 and 30 to 50% AMI, and we could allow for mid-rise. And we've looked at those parcels pretty carefully, and we have identified that we do have capacity to meet our housing allocation within the city without doing a deep dive into the town center. That said, we would also include looking at additional affordable housing to be developed in the town center under the inclusionary zoning program. There would be some amendments to the zoning controls in town center as part of the compliance approach here. The city could also pass a housing levy to fund land acquisition for affordable housing, the Kenmore example. And under the current scope of work, the 2024 comprehensive plan periodic update plans for 2,100 units. That, again, is we're required by state law to plan for our growth target. Affordable housing would be achieved, again, through the following: adding mid-rise capacity on bonus parcels for affordable housing, refinement of existing zoning controls to remove barriers, limit displacement, and address racially disparate impacts. Those are requirements of this update cycle. Also are definitely found in the King County countywide planning policies housing elements. Refinement of town centers' current zoning code to focus on mid-rise. We have some zones in the town center that allow for single-family homes, for example, where we might turn the dial on what's allowed in the use charts to limit those types of uses in favor of seeing more densified development in the form of mid-rise. Citywide House Bill 1110 strategy for middle housing. We haven't talked a lot about this one tonight, and one of the reasons for that is that we find that House Bill 1110 doesn't really do much in Sammamish. And the reason for that is that the state, in all that it was trying to achieve, allowed for an exemption for homeowners associations. And the problem there is that a majority of Sammamish, being more modern developments, are subdivisions with homeowners associations. We estimate about 80% of the city. So if you take out another 10% for areas that are not dividable and are critical areas and don't apply to HB 1110, you're left with about 10% of the city where HB 1110 might apply. So, those are very back of the napkin estimates from us. We're working on a more refined number, but just to say that 1110 does not play a big role in our delivery of housing with our comprehensive plan. Finally, setting up future sub-area planning to add capacity, diversity, and affordability for future housing development in existing centers. We don't have the budget or time to do the right job on planning, on doing sub-area planning with this comprehensive plan cycle. That is something that is best suited off-cycle to take on before the next update. So what we want to do is set up our comprehensive plan to prompt that, to give us all the framework to do that and provide us the direction so that we can then, if the council and the community sees fit, put that on our work plan and our budget in the years to come prior to the next update. With that, I'll turn it over to Kelly, unless there are any questions.
Okay, so the town center proposed scope of work. This would be building upon the comprehensive plan scope of work. And I just want to be really clear, it is optional. It is not mandatory. But expanding on our land use and housing strategy to include updating the town center plan and development regulations will ensure that a portion of that 2,100 unit affordable housing allocation will be built in the near term. That is because the town center has been very successful in producing affordable housing and is also currently where the demand exists. We have a lot of applications under review in the town center, and we anticipate a lot more applications are coming. Before we outline the proposed scope of work, let's just take a moment to review a brief history of town center planning, which starting in 2006, we began environmental work on the sub-area, and that included studying for alternatives under the draft EIS. In 2007, City Council approved a preferred alternative, and the final EIS was issued. The preferred alternative studied 2,000 residential units and 400,000 square feet of commercial space. In 2008, the town center plan was adopted, and in 2010 and 11, the town center development regulations were adopted. I will add, if you want to know more about town center planning, there's a lovely video, beautifully narrated, and linked on the town center webpage. It was shown at the open house. I would encourage those who want to dive into that to go watch that video. It does a great job. Great job. Okay, so where are we at? What is our current progress in the town center today? So built on the ground and occupied are 326 residential units. Currently under review are 390 units. That's a total of 716 units of residential units. Of those 716 units, 55 of those are affordable, which have been built, and then another 80 affordable housing units, which are currently under review. That's 135 affordable units at 80% AMI. For commercial space, we're actually further along. 135,000 plus has been built. We are currently reviewing an application that is proposing 82,000 square feet of commercial space for a total of can't do the math in my head, so I need to refer to my notes, 217,000 square feet of commercial space in the town center. Next slide. Considering that it's been 15 years that have passed since the adoption of the town center plan and another 13 years since the implementation of the development regulations, and with 1/3 of the residential and commercial development either achieved or currently under review, it really is an ideal time to consider updating the town center plan and associated regulations. It's also recommended in the town center plan itself, which states that when you hit that 1/3 mark, you should really consider reevaluating your caps. And to do that, you have to start with updating the EIS. As I mentioned before, the town center has been a significant contributor of our city's affordable housing supply. There are only a few cities in our region that have inclusionary zoning. We have been successful with our zoning code, and we really want to build upon that to get more affordable housing in the town center. But again, to do that, we would have to reevaluate those caps. Next, okay, so expanding the land use and housing strategy to include the town center would improve the affordable housing framework by increasing the maximum density. Base density would not change. We would look at reestablishing the affordable housing bonus pool. This is a pool that the city council approved as part of the development regulations for the town center that incentivized, it was completely voluntary, for developers who provided more affordable housing than what was mandated under the other part of the code. They would get additional market rate units. The good news and the bad news is that affordable housing bonus pool has been exhausted, which means it was really popular. The bad news is we're not going to get any more affordable housing in the town center in addition to the 10% mandated requirement in the code. So that means that's about 129 units under our current zoning that would be affordable remaining. This strategy would also remove any barriers and update the development regulations for the town center. We would really be looking at streamlining our permitting process, and a little bit more on that later. And we would look at updating our street design standards. Next. So the proposed scope of work would start off with an audit of our town center plan and development regulations. So reviewing those plans and seeing where we would need to make those changes. It would require us, again, because we would look at increasing capacity, to do a supplemental EIS, and this would be a planned action. So a little side note on planned action. This is really important. Planned actions are authorized under SEPA and provide more detailed environmental analysis during the development of the plan, rather than at the project permit review stage. Because of the upfront environmental review, projects that are consistent with city plans, the planned action ordinance, and the EIS mitigation measures are not subject to additional environmental review or appeals. Essentially, planned actions expedite the review process for development that are consistent with adopted plans. The advantage of a planned action process is to increase uncertainty and predictability, and to decrease the processing time, resulting in a real cost savings for the applicant. So if you just think about, if we can reduce that process, that's a huge savings. That's also going to incentivize getting affordable housing. The advantage for the city and citizens is improved economic development and implementation of the adopted town center plan. So doing a planned action is really critical for us. And then the last phase of the work would to actually update the plan and the development regulations. Yes.
I'd love to know where the numbers came from for the potential, like 4,000 units and 600,000.
So those new caps that we would look at reviewing under the EIS, supplemental EIS, those were already studied under the original EIS as one of the original 4 alternatives. Fun fact, and I'm not sure why this was done, as I mentioned, the EIS, the original EIS studied 400,000 square feet of commercial space. But the town center plan and the town center code actually allow up to 600,000. And that does not marry. So if you're a developer and you come in and you propose any square footage area above the 400,000, we're going to tell you you need to supplement or do an addendum to the EIS. That's a huge cost. And so we want to kind of realign and recalibrate and make sure what we do as part of the environmental review matches what we change in the plan and the code. I'm not sure why they did that.
Can I add to that? Another important point is that the 4,000 and 600,000 were studied, as Kelly said, as another alternative under the EIS work that was done. And those represent a fairly easy lift through a supplemental EIS. It's not easy, I should say. It's not as complex as if you were trying to go to 6,000 residential units and 900,000 square feet of commercial space. Because what we're doing is we're doing a review and an audit of the EIS, looking and see what's changed, and then addressing any changes through the addendum, or a supplement. So the point here is that with the limited time constraint, which we were just talking about, trying to get things out the door, this is a lift that is within range of what we could achieve. If we were looking to go higher than that, we think it would definitely take a lot longer and be more budget and is not within the timeline of the comp plan update.
Thank you. A question that had come up when we did our town center open house from a resident was green building code. Would this be an opportunity for us to start talking about that, or is that a separate issue that we would talk about down the road after this?
Yes, because that is a separate work item. Right now, the town center plan does address green building. How we need to implement that would be through new development regulations, which wouldn't require being studied under the EIS. So we would want to keep that separate because it's already something that we're anticipating is going to be on our work plan pretty soon. So we would just wrap it in with that.
So it seems like the question before us is how much work can be accomplished in the comp plan update period and how much needs to be done later. You mentioned sub-area plans. And I don't have a good sense of where that line is on this scope of work, but obviously we've got to get the minimum done to get the comp plan out the door, and then whatever we have funding, staff capacity to do on top of that would seem to make sense.
So absolutely. When we originally scoped the comprehensive plan update, we did not include doing an environmental impact statement as part of that. We were working under the assumption that we would be doing what we call an expanded checklist, SEPA DNS, which basically you take a closer look at the different elements of the environment and you identify whether or not there could be any potential adverse impacts and document why that is or is not the case. This would be moving one step further from that. So there's a standard DS, there's an expanded checklist DS, there's a supplemental EIS, and then there's an EIS, right? So that on the hierarchy of the amount of effort and budget and time, we were, one notch up from a typical DNS, and we would be moving up to the next step to a supplemental EIS as part of this work, which we've talked to our consultant about, and they are confident that we can fit it in if the scope is within the range that's appropriate for the amount of time we have. But if the scope expands beyond that, it might become out of sync with the comp plan update, and we would not have the benefit of the alignment we're looking for.
Can you clarify that comment on reestablishing the affordable housing bonus pool?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, the city had a affordable housing bonus pool. I mean, it's still there technically, that allocated 344 units. So bear with me here. The base density in town center is 1,656 units. And then there's this affordable housing bonus pool, which is 344 units. That gets us to 2,000 units studied under the EIS. To get to maximum density from base density or allocated density, there's only two ways you can do that. You can utilize the affordable housing bonus pool and use those 244 units, or you can get there through TDRs. But the code is very specific that TDRs cannot be used until the affordable housing bonus pool is exhausted, which it now is. So now let's talk about the affordable housing bonus pool and how the 344 units work. So for every one affordable housing unit used to meet maximum density, the developer gets 2 market rate units. And those that affordable unit has to be at 80% AMI. So you do the math. I think it's like 114 affordable housing units and then 228, I'm doing the math in my head, so if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, market rate units. So what we'd want to do is if we're going to actually increase our residential cap to 4,000, we would want to probably look at reestablishing an affordable housing bonus pool similar to what we did previously. And that has been successful for us because 4 projects sucked up all those units right away. So that has worked for us, and that has given us that additional affordable housing beyond what is already mandated, that 10% mandate. So it has worked for us.
So that means we can allow, say, a developer to build more market to get the additional affordable.
Yes.
Okay.
And I know everyone knows this, but I'll just state it for the record. If we come in and say, hey, we're going to study 4,000 units and those additional 2,000 units are all going to be affordable, that's a huge barrier to getting any housing built in the town center. It won't happen. You have to incentivize it. And one of those incentives is market rate units. Also, it's looking at the zoning controls. It's looking at streamlining permitting processes. It's a whole box of tools to get that affordable housing. And so that's what we will be evaluating as part of this EIS, and the options will be bringing back to the City Council and to the Planning Commission as we look at updating our town center plan and code.
So you'll be bringing us back numbers that we could choose from?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think this will be fun.
All
I'm
right,
looking
thank
forward
you.
to that. I've been waiting a long time to do this work. Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly.
Kelly, thank you. So I just want to clarify this. I think you started off with saying that this is an optional piece, the update. So I just want to be clear. So the $669,959 that's mentioned in the memo, is that just specifically for the town center update, or is that something else?
I believe that's just for the comprehensive plan update. Evan? Sorry. I believe that's just for the comp plan update. We don't have a number right now. We're working on that scope of work depending on the outcome of this meeting. And if you give us direction to do that, we will be coming back with a number.
So my next question probably would be, do we have the budget to do that, right? And again, I know it'll depend on the scope and how much work is there. I don't know, Scott is looking to answer that question.
Well, Councilmember, I would answer that by saying this is why the conversation is happening now, so that as we come to you with the mid-biennial budget look, we want to be able to, if that's the direction of council, be able to accommodate the work, because I think David and Kelly are correct to say now is the time if the direction is to move forward with this work. I think the time frame is pretty short, and so we'd want to get it off the ground sooner rather than later.
Great. And then Kelly, did you say that the EIS would be initiated by the city?
Yes.
That is. Yeah. So how does that help the city? I mean, it ultimately helps the developers or whoever wants to build in town center as well. So what are the advantages for the city initiating this?
So the advantage is that we would be accommodating a portion of those 2,100 units that allocated affordable housing to the town center. We would give a specific number, so we could say 500 of the 2,100 is going to go into the town center. Right now with the comp plan, it can go anywhere. And we would be very prescriptive in saying a certain portion of that 2,100 would be allocated to the town center.
Great. And so as part of, I thought you also said that the base density would not change. Can you help me understand what that means again?
Yeah, we want to be really careful with our base density in the city, because our base density was used to determine our capacity, which was used to determine our growth target. PSRC has been very, very clear with us. No upzoning Don't increase that base density. Because as David mentioned earlier, it really throws out the regional distribution of growth. What we would be looking is at, and I know this is going to sound very confusing, but we'd be looking at increasing the maximum density. So if you think about it this way, base density is your by right density. To get to maximum is totally voluntary. It is, if you want max, you're going to have to give us something, and that is the affordable housing. And that we think for sure PSRC is going to be happy with, but we will also be satisfying our friends over at King County when they do the review of our housing and land use element. So again, this is that kind of line that we're walking right now, like how far can we push this? So our strategy here would be looking at increasing the maximum densities in the town center, and to do that we would require more affordable to be built and to incentivize it, including market rate units.
Great. And what I heard, at least when you were answering Councilmember Lamb's question, was that right now, for example, we have 10%, which is allocated for our 0 to or 80% AMI, right? But when we do this update, we potentially open it up to say there could be more incentives, there could be higher percentages that we might require. So that opens it up.
Absolutely,
Great.
absolutely. That's all on the table.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, just to, because I think on the sort of base density versus max density for normal humans not sitting in this room, just to do like a math problem, like if you lived in an R4, that means you could build 4 acres per unit. That's your base density. And then your max density versus so if the town center was 1 acre of R4, because we're going to keep really simple math, then the base density would be 4 units, but we've capped it at 2 units. And so what you're saying is that like maybe we're going to look at, you can have 2.5 or 3, right? So we're still not necessarily getting out to that max base density, if you will. So we're not talking about upzoning anything in the town center if you did this. We're not changing any of the actual zoning. What we're talking about is maybe lifting some of the limits that would get them closer to what the zoning is. Is that correct?
Yeah, and maybe I'll take a different approach here. So right now in the A zone, the base density is 16 units per acre, and the maximum is 40, and that's a huge jump, right? To get to 40, you're giving us affordable housing. So you're going to give us 2 of that, a 2-to-1 ratio to get to that 40 units. But again, that's totally voluntary. So Ichijo, which is the development just kitty corner to us, the townhomes, they didn't develop to maximum density because they built townhomes, and that's a building product that takes more space. Alternative would have been multifamily, but they went with townhomes. They didn't need to hit maximum density. But the multifamily, Sam Apartments and Sky Apartments definitely went to maximum density. They needed to do maximum density to get that type of building type. So one is going to depend on the builder and what they're proposing. But as David mentioned, the way to get to those affordable units is through multifamily housing types. So that's where we're going to be looking at upping the maximum density to really incentivize it, but also looking at the zoning controls.
Yeah, sorry, to clamp down on. So we went through this with our development regs phase 1 and phase 2. One of the problems that Sammamish has faced historically was that when the town center plan was put in place, the vision was that a lot of the density would be driven and go to the town center. In fact, the opposite happened. We saw a lot of growth out in the R zones because we had relatively very few zoning controls for single family, yet we had these complex rules in our town center that developers were really trying to figure out and couldn't quite get a grasp on. Since we've changed the zoning controls in the R districts, we've seen that push development to the town center again because town center has become attractive. It's complex to develop in our R zones now. We now are matching regulations that our counterparts have in Issaquah, Redmond, Kirkland, Bellevue. We have similar rules. We didn't have those back when the town center plan was put in place, and we were a little bit late to change those. If we had changed the R zone regulations when the town center was put in place, I'm fairly confident we would have seen more interest and growth in the town center happen. So now that we've taken that step, our opportunity is to also change the development regulations in the town center to try to encourage or push development towards a denser form of development in multifamily, as opposed to building single-family homes or townhouses in the town center, which are a great product, but they're not necessarily furthering the vision of diversity in housing choice and affordability.
So you touched on another question. So that's the big question people have is, how do we, if we're talking about trying to focus our development in the centers, how do we prevent the development from happening outside? One was you talked about having tighter controls in the R zones. And then currently, even if we implemented a robust TDR program, the town center wouldn't necessarily be available to be a sending site as currently, right, under the current plan, because they've already hit, with the affordable housing pool, they've already hit that 2,000 mark, right? So the TDR, part of having a robust TDR program, right, to be able to encourage people who have land and they want to get the value out of their land instead of selling it to a developer and developing in their neighborhoods, and we want that to move to the town center, we would need to adjust this. Is that correct?
So I think that's going to be a policy decision by the city council. We would need to look at our TDR program, and that actually is next on the agenda.
Right.
It's definitely a policy decision. Right now, like I said, the way to hit maximum density in the town center is through TDRs, or the affordable housing bonus pool. So right now, we're actually seeing TDRs being used in applications because there is no the affordable housing bonus pool has been exhausted, and that has its benefits too, right? It's a good program, and so I think that's what we'll need to come back to council for direction. What is your priorities? Is it, conserving these areas in the city that we don't want to develop and sending it to the town center? Or is it getting more affordable housing? And honestly, the answer could be both. And there is a plan. I mean, we're doing it now. There is a way to achieve both. It's just again, turning the levers. Where do you want that to happen? So that would definitely come back to you prior to really getting into the development regulations to get these questions answered before we bring back a draft for your review.
And because the existing affordable housing pool has been drained, so to speak, to go with the pool analogy, would you need to raise the 2,000 cap if we wanted if we wanted to refill the affordable housing pool?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And can we refill that affordable housing pool with more stringent, like we just did 80% in the last one? Could we make this new one help us hit these 0 to 30 and 30 to 50?
It's going to be, that is a conversation we're really going to need to engage with our development community, and not just the developers who are here today, but the ones that have already built. You make it too strict and you're not going to get any development, because it does not pencil out. If we're going to rely on the development community to provide us really 50 to 80%, it's going to be hard to get the development community, unless they're a nonprofit, to build 0 or 30% below. But if we really want to achieve the 50 to 80%, we're going to need to engage with them. And if we go too far, they're not going to build. They're not even going to take us up on that maximum density. But we also don't want to be like, oh, here's all these, market rate units and line their pockets. So it's a balancing act. And part of the scope of work would be bringing on an economist to study that and to see what that right balance is. But we're going to want to calibrate that with the development community to see if this is actually achievable, because we do want to build affordable housing. So we need to make sure it works for them.
And we haven't talked about it, but I know there are several companies who shall not be named who have been offering 0% loans, right, to encourage and make some of this happen. Is that part of our strategies as well, to be able to help developers fund the development through no-interest loans?
So I think I think just a general strategy we should be thinking citywide, and that could be part of the housing diversification toolkit that you all just reviewed and adopted. But yeah, and that would be a work plan item that council could definitely move forward for the 25-26 work program and budget.
And if you moved forward with this, if you got direction to move forward with this, it doesn't mean we're doing it. It just means you're going to go study it and bring back options, right? It's not like we're deciding to raise any numbers. It's just exploring what it would look like if we did that and how that might help us achieve affordable housing, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the direction we're asking for tonight is, do you want us to come back with a resolution with that 4,000 units and up to 4,000 units and 600,000 square feet of commercial space, and also a contract amendment with Framework to do that work.
But again, that's just to do the supplemental EIS. That doesn't mean we're actually implementing any changes to the town center plan. We're just looking at doing an EIS and seeing what that would look like.
No, that would also include updating the town center plan and development regulations.
But it wouldn't be a decision point. What it would be doing is enabling a work plan for us to work through all the policy points, the code points, and that would be supported by environmental review, identifying where there's potential impacts. And then we'd come back to you with a package where you ultimately would be passing with the comp plan a set of policies for the town center, updating the plan, and then also a concurrent code package when we update our development regulations for the city. We'd also update the town center regulations, and there'd be the supplemental EIS would be issued right before that, so you'd have all the environmental impacts in hand and understand those, and that's really the purpose of that environmental review, is to make sure the decision makers understand the range of impacts from an action. So that would be the sequence, is we would go about studying this, we would work through all the decision points with you, we would come back with a package, there'd be a public release draft, which would be the point where you'd be starting to finalize those decisions. We'd send that off to King County, have Commerce take a look at it, get feedback from some of our counterparts, and then you all could move on and decide whether those are things you want to do or fine tune it at the very end.
Okay, thanks.
So a bunch of my questions got answered through the conversation here, but the thing I'm still, Kelly, not exactly tracking is, maybe this is just me, but it seems like I heard you say that this is likely difficult to accomplish within the time frame of the comp plan, but I also thought I heard you say that, or suggest that in order to meet our affordable housing targets, we have to do that, or this is one of the main strategies to do that. So am I understanding that you're suggesting that in order to meet our allocated affordable housing, we need to double the size of the town center residential units?
So I think the next series of slides are going to answer that question. So can I come back? Do you? So yeah, I'm going to go through the next ones very quickly because I think we've touched on a lot of these things, but I do want to do a side-by-side comparison between just focusing on the 24 comprehensive plan update, which is our current scope of work, and then the town center plan update, which is the proposed kind of expanded scope of work to update the town center plan. So the comprehensive plan, that is mandatory. We have to do it. It's currently in our budget. The environmental review would be a non-project SEPA expanded checklist. We need to have that. That GMA tells us that needs to be done by December 31st, 2024. And that does plan for affordable housing, just as David reviewed earlier. If we were to expand that scope of work to include allocating a portion of the 2,100 units of affordable housing to the town center, it's not mandatory. We don't have to do it because we can do it as do the comprehensive plan without changing any of the town center regulations. This work is not budgeted, so we would need to come back with amended scope of work and contract with Framework. It would require environmental review, so an SEIS. We are aiming to complete it also by December 31st, 2024, so we can start 25 ready to roll with that update along with the comprehensive plan and its associated regulations update. The difference is the affordable housing. If we were to complete this work under the town center, because the development demand is there today, we will likely produce more affordable housing above the 128 that is remaining in the town center. So, yes, we don't have to do it, but if we really want to see affordable housing built soon, this is the way, this is an option to get there, and that's the town center, updating the town center plan. Because the development demand is in the town center, if we say, you know what, let's just push this off to 25, 26, that's fine, but we may be too late because the applications are continuing to come in. And we may lose our opportunity to really make a difference in the town center when it comes to adding more affordable units. So we just want to be careful with that. But I really want to emphasize this is an optional scope of work. We do not need to do this to comply with the GMA and to get our comp plan certified. The difference is that we probably will see more affordable housing sooner, and we can actually report on that in 2029 and hopefully get a good report card from Commerce. So again, I'm going to go through these really quick because a lot of the questions that we heard tonight are some of the same questions that we heard prior to this presentation. Once the agenda bill was posted, we had a series of questions come in. So the first one is the objective of the proposed town center plan update to add more affordable housing requirements to the town center development, Yes. I think that's pretty clear from what we discussed tonight. Is the city planning for all the affordable housing allocation to go into the town center? And to be clear, that's the 2,100 allocated affordable housing. Absolutely not. We do not want to do that. That is not a good strategy. We do want to allocate a portion of that to the town center, but we also want to make sure that we're providing affordable housing across the city. It's equitable, it's fair, it provides different housing types that are affordable, and it's the right thing to do. So we do not want to put all 2,100s in the units in the town center. That's not a good idea. Would the town center plan update increase capacity for market rate units? Absolutely, because if we're going to allocate affordable, we need to match that with market rate to incentivize building the affordable. Would the town center update increase the by right zoned capacity in the town center? No. Again, that will not make PSRC happy, so let's not go there. We want to keep the base density, and really focus on increasing the maximum density, which will get us those additional affordable housing units. Next slide. How much capacity can be added through the SEIS? Because we're trying to get this done at the same time as the comp plan, or we're proposing to do that at the same time as the comp plan, we really want to study those caps that have already been looked at through the previous environmental review. So as part of the alternatives that were considered with the original EIS. If we do that, there's efficiencies, and that's where we can keep to the same timeline as the comp plan. And lastly, is it advantageous to complete this scope of work now while at the same time completing the 24 comprehensive plan? Staff recommends yes, it is. Again, we can make sure the town center plan and comprehensive plan are in alignment. Very similar to what Avril said earlier. If you're doing both plans, you can make sure you're avoiding any conflicts. But also because this is where the development demand is today. And we really want to take advantage of that build more affordable housing. So next slide. Direction. We had a series of questions in your agenda packet tonight. And I will not read each one of these questions, but we would like to get this direction. Depending on this direction, that's going to tell us what our next steps are. So with that, I will stop talking and open up the floor and would love to hear your feedback.
I have just a quick question about some of the different developers that are interested in the town center area. I know that Merrill Gardens is one and others. Are there any affordable units in those, or is that considered 100%? I mean, how is that looked at? Is it commercial? Is it housing?
So Aegis is probably a better example because Aegis we're currently reviewing that application that's located next to Ichijo. That is proposing senior care. It's a facility, it's not considered a residential unit, therefore it doesn't have affordable requirements because those units don't have kitchens. They're more like a care facility. So those do not impact the residential unit cap or the affordable housing allocation. Merrill Gardens, well, that application hasn't come in, so I can't speak to that yet, so I don't know where that fits in line, but definitely Brownstone West, which is the townhome project that's producing 3 affordable housing units, as well as STCA's big mixed-use development that is producing quite a bit of affordable housing as part of that application. That's the project that completely exhausted the affordable housing bonus pool, so we're going to get a lot more affordable there.
Okay, thanks for listing those questions. That really moved us along. But you did mention about not having all of the density go into town center, but by doing what you're proposing, more of the density would go into town center. Is that correct? Taking advantage of the interest that's there right now.
Yeah, definitely taking advantage of it, but balancing with what is realistic, right? So we just, and that's what we need to study under the EAS. What is that right balance between affordable units and market rate units? And then when you add other incentives, like processing permits quicker and looking at changing some of the zoning controls, all of those things together, what does that look like for the total number of units? And so that I don't have an answer for right now, but that's what we would study as part of that EIS.
Well, part of the reason I was asking that is some of the, at least within the Planning Commission discussions that we've had, is some of the benefit of maybe localizing density in order to keep tree canopy and things like that. So what I was hearing is that the advantage of doing what's proposed and doing these town center update now rather than at some future date helps to achieve that desire, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay. And then I did ask this one question via email, but I do get the efficiencies of doing the 2 plans together. What I don't quite understand, and maybe you could elaborate, is the need to finish them at the same time versus having the town center, like the regs and so forth, slip out several more months, which might help with budgeting or workload, things like that. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Don't we start? You could start.
So the way the comp plan update cycle works with this round and what HB 1220 calls for is that we have the policies and the regulatory framework fully flushed out and in place prior to certification.
If I may, let me just give a little bit of my less planning ease and more, I'll just call it straight functionality. Anytime you're going to do a code update, it's a arduous task. Prefer not to do them in like back-to-back years. That's a lot. I think the part about consolidating and doing them at the same time, there are definitely economies of scale there, and then we have a consistent code moving forward. But more realistically, I would also say that there is development pressure in town center, and the sooner we can get this up and available, the higher the likelihood that we will actually get affordable housing units built. Because if we don't, then I think Kelly started the presentation by saying town center can move on its merry way and we don't have to do a thing. We just won't get any more affordable housing built. And I think part of what you're hearing from us is this is our true opportunity to incentivize as opposed to just plan for and accommodate low-income housing in our zoning codes. And I think that's the piece that if I, for my lay person's terms, that's the part where to us on the staff level, it makes the most sense is to try to do that now to get out ahead of, because once somebody vests, obviously they're off on their way and no more shall we meet when it comes to saying if you want to do more and build affordable housing as a component of it.
I think Ajay was first before me, I think. Oh, Mark, sorry, didn't even see that. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't know it was me. So for a couple of times we've talked about incentivizing building contractors to be able to do this thing. How do we measure the success of that? Are they going to come running and saying, yes, we'll take your 2-to-1 with both our hands and do it? Or do we force them to do it? Is it at max? How do we say that we've succeeded at it? Number one. Number two, isn't this all a function of the economy? So if the economy is going to be a little bit weaker as we move forward, or not as strong as it is, we could have done all the right things and yet it may not have gotten the thing. I just want to understand where do we draw a line of evaluation on this whole thing?
That's $1 million question. I think all of the above. I mean,
I'll take the $1 million.
Yeah, yeah, I think we all would. I think, and this is why we really do want to build the A-team with a contract with our consultant. We want to answer those questions. What is that balance? Yeah, the economist is going to play a big role in that. So right now, again, there's mandatory and voluntary provisions in our code, and they both have been successful. I've looked at other inclusionary zoning codes in the region, Issaquah, Redmond, Newcastle, and there are some challenges with those. So again, it's going to be doing a lot of research. It's going to be having a conversation. It's going to be pulling Arch in. It's going to be building up that consultant team. So I don't have an answer to that, but we're going to find an answer and find what works for Sammamish.
And the second part is related to, do we mandate it? How does it happen? The economy is softening. We forecast that partnerships will become all the more important, especially as we start to see some potential state funding, possible county funding, and the not-for-profit industry is also out there and is ready to partner with for-profit builders. And there are definitely examples of that have been very successful.
Sounds good. And my last follow-up question on that thing is that if we do this and we do it well and we hit it out of the park, wouldn't that by itself raise the price of the dwellings, which will take it off the 0 to 30, 50 to 80% and make us increase a problem that we are trying to solve?
So the nice thing about our code as an example, once an affordable housing is identified in an application, there is a contract on that affordable housing. It has to be affordable for 50 years, and that runs with the land. So it does not matter who owns it. It is 50 years that has to be that affordable housing unit. That guarantees that we avoid that problem that you just mentioned. And Arch monitors that for us and manages that for us today.
All right. Thank you so much for taking us through this, because I was very curious about what was in the why we needed to do the SEIS. So thank you. I have a quick question about so it sounds like the deeper affordable are probably at the bonus parcels. And just quick question, is there a lot of work to figure those out, and where does that fit in to the plan?
It's a bit of work. What it would be is an overlay that would target those parcels where that could be achieved, either in public ownership or religious-based ownership, or where there might be some sort of opportunity. And we'd be creating some additional allowances and zoning controls for that overlay that would promote and accommodate mid-rise on those properties.
And does that just sort of happen as it comes up, or does it?
Yeah, then when say a religious-based property was to want to build and partner with a not-for-profit housing provider, they wanted to build, a five-story mid-rise building, they would follow the zoning controls for that and just come in and build it and get a permit.
So we wouldn't have to do a lot of work to.
We don't see that as a major lift with this project. I think finding the properties, and we've been having some outreach meetings to try and get an understanding as to whether there's interest in that or opposition to that. And we've had some real positive feedback from the faith-based ownership in the city.
Did I answer
Sorry.
your question, Mark?
Kind
I'm
of.
afraid I may not have.
Close enough. So I would just want to express a concern about the whole thing. And as I think I understood what you said is if the council gives you direction to go down this path, then we've committed ourselves in getting our comp plan approved to this strategy. Because once we start down that path, then we're relying on it to get our affordable units. And my concern is just that we may all think it's great, but there is potential for controversy and a lot of discussion. I would not want the idea of doubling the number of residential units in our town center to get our comp plan process sidetracked and cause us to struggle to achieve our date that we're absolutely obligated to. You know, it seems like, oh, here's a good strategy that would work. Yes. But again, doubling the number of housing units in our town center, given our history, I think there could be some time have to be spent dealing with that and what it might mean from people's perception and everything like that. And we just have to be really looking out for and careful that we don't get off track and then struggle to achieve our completion date. I'm a little concerned because it's really kind of an audacious plan, which may be great, but then we're very reliant on it to get to the end of next year. So just a concern I have.
And that is a very good concern because that is also a concern of staff's, and we share it. You know, if we are directed to do this work, these would be two separate projects working on parallel paths, checking in with each other to make sure we're not, you know, conflicting. But we would definitely treat this, you know, do this work in parallel paths like I just mentioned. And we want to set those fence posts because we can do this. The comp plan can still move forward. We do not want to do anything that's going to threaten certification of the comp plan, but we want to set that scope of work for the town center plan to be very clear and that we're all on the same page so that we don't get squirrely and start thinking, oh, well, while we're here, let's do this, this, and this. No, we have a purpose and we want to make sure our timeline and the scope of work meet that purpose. If we're looking at, hey, we just want to redo the whole town center plan altogether, new goals, policies, all of that, then I would probably say that needs to come at another time because that would be hard to do by December 31st, 2024. So again, we want to make sure we're very clear with the scope of work. That's what we would be coming back to City Council with in, oh, you want to go to the next slide? November 21st as part of a resolution to solidify what that scope of work would be. So to help avoid the squirrelier moments.
So one way to guard against that is to very clearly define the action as part of the environmental study. And that should be defined by resolution by the council in consult with the planning commission. And that would then ensure that we have set our bumpers as we navigate through the process and sticking to that. And if like Kelly said, if we're going afield and now rewriting the town center plan, you know, redoing the vision statement, redoing, you know, a lot of the stuff that's not relevant to the housing supply, you know, unless we need to because there's a noted impact related to increasing the housing supply, that then if we could stay on that and stay focused to that, then we will be successful. But if we veer out of that and start to look at things that are not really germane to the housing supply, then we're going to end up in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, sorry. So Kelly, I know you mentioned that, you know, updating the town center plan would help us when we give our report to the Department of Commerce in 2029. So again, still trying to sort of understand if completing this town center plan by 2024, does that give us a leg up? And what are the advantages to that, right? Like, do we qualify for more grants or will we get, you know, like what is the advantage and what is it that we're looking from the Department of Commerce as, you know, as being successful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gives us a leg up in actually achieving that affordable housing sooner and being able to report that. regarding the grants, I think that's to come, to see what comes from the state and what that looks like. And again, this is in addition to what we're already doing as part of our comprehensive plan. And I think it's also really important to know that, yes, we'll be looking at the town center plan, but when it comes to actually implementation of our housing diversification toolkit that, again, we just adopted this spring, that's really going to be setting that work program 25 and forward. So we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket with the town center plan. We also want to be looking beyond that, and that's looking at, starting to look at the other sub areas. Maybe looking at partnerships to develop on bonus parcels, including some of our own land. There's a lot of work, and it's going to take, being very strategic on how to get to being able to report out. But again, we're not going to report out in 2029 that we're halfway there. It's just, that's not feasible. A lot of this is a lot of work. But by doing the town center, we might actually be able to report physical units built by 2029, and that would be a big achievement.
Right. So when you're talking about, trying to show that we can build these affordable units on like the church property or land that the city owns, that is not part of this update that we would do to the town center. That is absolutely separate.
That's
right?
separate, yeah. And that would be a work plan item for, again, starting in 25 forward.
Right. So I know, and I was part of the planning commission when we did the development code updates, phase 1, phase 2. So I think it's really great to hear that, those really had an impact on the applications, as you guys are seeing, and that has sort of served its purpose where people were seeing more of the developments happen that the residents didn't like, and that more of it is getting targeted towards the town center. I think one of the feedback from the commissioners at that time was, just the discrepancy we saw in all the different plans, right? Like the wording was different, it was contradicting, and I think that was part of the updating the development regulations. I think I'm still struggling to understand like how updating the town center plan and the comp plan at the same time, like where are those synergies and where do you think is the biggest sort of advantage you'll have when updating both of them together? Because they can get out of sync, but I think I'm just not understanding that. And I would like us to go forward with updating the town center plan, but I think I almost feel like I need something before 21st of November to really understand like the budget, and then also, how is it that it's really advantageous for us to do? And I think another thing that I just want us to be very clear on is that 4,000 number and the 600,000 for commercial, that was discussed way back in 2006, right? And it was part of the EIS study for then, so it's not a new number. It's just that it got decreased, and then now we are revisiting that number again.
Yes.
Thanks.
There you go.
So one of the benefits of taking the two projects on at the same time, and to be clear, we could do it without. It's not as this slide shows here is. Oh, where was I? Way up here. I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go. It's not mandatory. We have a path to compliance currently, but really it's about at the end of the day delivering housing units for people, and we think that there's value to that. The value of doing them two together and where the efficiencies come in are there are some policy directions that need to be made where would really impact the town center. And I know, one that's a bit controversial, and I'll just throw it out there because it's controversial, is tree protection. And the right level of tree protection in the town center, one of the bigger barriers that we hear about to delivering projects and making projects pencil is the flexibility in site design and having existing trees located on a site where your densest development needs to go. Now, I'm not saying to do it one way or the other. I'm noting that that is a point of tension and that we need to have a community conversation about that. And the comprehensive plan is a great place to have that because it sets the tempo for there are different parts of the city where you ratchet up your canopy protection, and there are other parts of the city where you're willing to forego canopy preservation for small, compact areas in favor of regeneration and replanting. that's an example. It's a bit controversial, but I wanted to highlight that having that conversation once, as opposed to having it once in the comp plan and then again with an update to the town center plan later, is there's definitely an efficiency there. And we really would like to know from the community what the best approach is, because we've heard different viewpoints that aren't always in alignment.
I'll add to that the transportation element. That is going to be a big conversation. And so if you're looking at increasing that maximum density in the town center, we should be having that conversation once. And what does that mean for the overall system within the town center? So I think that's where you're going to see the efficiencies as well, along with the housing conversation, more efficiencies there.
So I know you're looking for direction from council, and I support amending the town center plan. I support doing a supplemental EIS and upping the capacity to 4,000 residential units and the 600,000 commercial space. I understand that just because we're upping the capacity does not mean that we're going to build 4,000 units, that they can just as well be built in other centers. I deeply want to have more affordable units in this city for the people that live here. I think that's a huge equity issue. We are in a housing crisis, and we should be doing everything we can to increase housing affordability. I see, just the inequities of incomes, people that can build the wealth through homes and people that are greatly burdened by putting so much of their incomes in rentals. So I want to move forward with this direction. Thank you.
So I have a suggestion. I think we should move forward. But where I was thrown off a little bit, and this is in the packet, and staff are proposing to expand Framework's existing scope of work to include the following. It says auditing town center plan, identifying areas that need updating. I suggest that should be more focused around housing. That sounds potentially very broad. Then the supplemental EIS, great. And then the part about revise the town center plan, and includes reflect renewed vision for the town center. Again, maybe to Mark's point, when you read that, it sounds like it could be really broad. So it'll be important to see what that exact scope of work is for Framework that would be proposed, and maybe through this providing guidance to them to be kind of more focused rather than broader. So that's my suggestion for having to move forward.
That is great feedback, and absolutely.
Okay. So I'm assuming this is the very best staff recommendation that we have, that there isn't a plan B. I just want to know. Like, this is
Plan B would be the compliance option.
just to stay
Just
with.
stay the course we're currently on with the original scope of the comp plan, et cetera. That's Plan B.
Okay. All right. Because I agree with Commissioner Boffman. This will get mischaracterized. It will be rampant. It probably already is. And there will be massive misunderstanding, an intentional mass misunderstanding. It will be spewed out that we're just going to develop the holy heck out of everything. And but that's what I signed up for. I signed up to take that. So, no, I signed up for whatever hits come my way in specific. So I am delighted to agree with this document. I want affordable housing. That is my thing. That's what I care about. Any way that we can get there, I want to get there. So that's it for me. The only question mark I had in my head is there at any point, do you think, in this dual process, where you're doing this mutual check-in with the comp plan and the revised or reimagined version as far as what we could do, that you would get an unintended consequence that would stop you. It would make you think, oh, it's not going to work the way we thought it was going to work. I mean, it's hard to look into the future to see that happening, but
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
because it could.
Yeah.
You know, something could happen that the bottom falls out. Now, we can always revert, right?
Right.
Just back. I also believe that we can take whatever we've learned out of this process forward. So I don't consider it wasted effort or wasted funds. But that is just a caution that I have, is just like the what if.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that comes to mind, and I absolutely agree with Chair Boffman and Commissioner Bresco, is that we got to set the fence posts and be very clear on this scope of work. Where I could see maybe a challenge is, the policy goals and the development expectation. Meaning, we'll be working with the development community. They, from our conversations, they understand the responsibility of providing affordable housing, but they also have a bottom line. And so, we could really spin out on that. I think if we go in there, wholeheartedly and trying to find a solution that works for both from a policy perspective, but also from a development and actually getting built, and reach that, I think that's going to guarantee success. But I think we could maybe spin out on that a little bit, and we just need to be very clear and transparent on what we're trying to achieve here and come to a common agreement. But yeah, I can kind of see that being maybe a possibility. But overall, I think we need to keep to the scope of work and be very clear with that to get this work done by the end of 24.
I also think there's some risk in misunderstanding around all the different bumpers that we presented previously, whether it's the growth target or the affordable housing allocation or the rate of growth and how we plan. And one of the challenges for us is making sure that we have a contingency plan in our comp plan that addresses a rate of development, that if we are starting to get towards that ceiling, so to speak, pretty quickly, as Scott defined, if we're successful, what a horrible thing to happen in delivering affordable housing, that we have a contingency plan to address how to make sure we're delivering services, which include park space, schools, transportation services, stormwater, all those things that are really essential, that we need to absolutely make sure we're considering what the contingency is if the rate of development reaches our growth target before we start the next planning cycle for the next comp plan update in 10 years.
So you say that this would help us deliver affordable housing sooner, but don't you really mean delivering any meaningful number of affordable housing units? Like, if we don't do this, well, we'll have a plan that says, well, sure, if somebody comes in and is willing to build affordable housing, at a loss, because they're super generous, then our current plan, or Plan B, as you call it, will work. But without this, do we really think we'll get any meaningful number of affordable housing units?
Not unless public funding comes through.
Okay, so there is no public funding at the moment. We're hopeful, but as I understand at work, hope is not a strategy. That we don't believe that we'll really get any if we don't do something. Now, what I'm not clear on, though, is we're going to go do the study. So again, we're not committing to doing anything. We're committing to go do the study, right, to do the supplemental EIS and to start to look at this. It doesn't mean we're saying we're going to raise the number to 4,000. It's saying we're going to go look at what that looks like. Maybe it's 2,500, maybe it's 3,000, maybe it's something else. Is that accurate? Like, we're not making the decision now. We're saying the first step to do anything is we would have to do a supplemental EIS and give ourselves what would that look like up to that number. Is that accurate?
Councilmember, that is correct. Recall that an EIS really is looking at the outer parameters as far as you might want to go and studying it so that any decision you make within those parameters is acceptable. It's just if you go outside of that, that you're then not allowed to move forward. So an EIS is really just putting a broad circle around whatever it is you're going to do and saying we've studied everything within that. And then it's a policy choice for the decision makers to decide anywhere up to that point if they want to make changes.
And the one thing, and you may not be able to answer this here, but I don't understand how any of this would affect our development agreement, right, that we're potentially negotiating. So I'm not clear where this fits into any of those equations.
Well, there's a lot of things that we are in discussions with. The current development agreement that actually exists, it would not impact that because that stands essentially.
But we came up with like a list of things you guys were going to be negotiating for future development agreements, and I don't understand if or how this would affect that.
I think the short version is, Councilmember, is that if council chooses to move forward with this, that it would allow them the opportunity to potentially take advantage of the change in the affordable housing limits so that they could develop and bring those units into what they might want to do in the future. They would have to be willing to wait for us to finish this work before they would be available. So this is a partnership, if you will. If council chooses to go down this path, again, they could move forward today and they could build whatever they wanted to build under the current zoning and town center plan. I think it's just a question of, does council want to change that to try to incentivize more low-income housing, in which case they might want to take advantage of that.
Okay. And then the only thing I'll throw out is, if I recall, when we met with Redmond, when we had our joint meeting with Redmond, the one takeaway I took from that was, well, there were two, one, make your mandatory number or percentage of affordable housing higher. Like, so I know you're going to go study it, but I wouldn't be okay with any of this unless we had a much, much higher. 10% is just not even close to high enough. And then again, I think the other part they said was about our design standards, to be making sure we're looking at those at the same time. So I know we're trying to narrow this to housing, but they very clearly said when you're doing this, if they had to do it all over again, those were the two things they would go do differently. And they just did it, so I don't want to lose those lessons learned. I guess I'm not totally clear. Like, this is just, it's not just about the EIS, though. You're asking us to give you direction on both the EIS and a plan that we're not sure what the EIS would pencil out at the same time. Is that correct?
So what would come back, so you would just give us direction to come back on November 21st with a resolution identifying the caps that you would to evaluate under the EIS. We would do that. You're absolutely right. We'd do that work first before we would do any updates to town center plan and development regulations. The EIS is absolutely critical, but if we're going to actually implement anything, we got to update the town center plan and development regulations. So we will bring that information back, that scope of work with the schedule on November 21st and give you that presentation. So tonight's not just the go forth and conquer and we'll see you back in, fall of 24. We're going to come back here in a couple of months and provide the scope of work and receive further feedback on that so that you are comfortable with that decision to have us move forward with this work.
Okay, because it does feel scary. The double number feels really scary. I mean, I'm, again, all in on the affordable housing, and I don't see how we achieve it without being able to have a robust TDR program and having an affordable housing pool, both of which can't happen with what we currently have. But that feels really big, and I'm not sure. You're asking for direction, but we don't have all the details, and so I'm feeling like we need to see more of those details to make that call. Thanks.
How long did it take us to do our last EIS?
The most recent one, I was wondering if you meant the one for town center.
Oh, no, because you haven't done that
The
one
Bluma EIS.
Yeah, how long did it take us to do the Bluma?
I just going off the,
Over a year, right?
yeah, I was gonna
Let's
say
just
18
start there.
months, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Second is, not to put you on the spot, Scott, but have you ever done an EIS, led the troops on an EIS? Not to put you on the spot, I'm sorry, that's probably kind of negative, but
It's okay, Councilmember. I don't mind. I think one of the things that you have to remember is the SEPA official here in the city is actually David, and so David would be the point person for leading the EIS.
Okay. So,
Just
well, except that I know who's responsible in the end, and so
Well-
I'm actually, my question is looking out for you, to be honest. That's where I'm coming from. So, because I like my city manager. David, so on the Bluma EIS, how much help did you get from the city manager's office to accomplish the task at hand for the Bluma?
It was a significant team effort, so there was quite a bit of support from the city manager's office, from Public Works, from Parks, from everyone involved.
And would that be similar in this particular EIS?
Absolutely, I would see it as a team effort for the city and also the community. Really, we're really wanting to make sure we get the right amount of feedback and people are aware of it. So that's a real important component of it too, is the outreach.
Yeah, because I took to the heart the planning commissioner's comments and the concern. I echo that, and you now have heard that. The other question I had is, because I'm looking at options or ways to maybe make me feel a little more comfortable, is the town center plan, scope of the plan, this kind of change, would that be an item, if we went with what I consider Plan A, you guys are calling Plan B, is just to go with the course of actions that would work and can be delivered? Could we do the other one through the docket process? Because then it wouldn't be 10 years down the road. It could be 1, 2, 3 years. I know it's not as efficient, but it could be delivered.
Actually, as a council, you can put it on the 25 work plan, the 26 work plan. You have the authority to do so. We wouldn't even have to go through the docketing process. You would just identify it as a work plan item when you would want to do that work.
So based on the information I'm receiving right now, should staff amend the scope of the work for the town? No, I'd delay that. Should staff complete the, no, let's not do that. Should staff include any, no, let's not do that. Do I understand? Yes, I completely understand what you're asking and what the process is. Thank you very much.
Yep, I understand the 4,000 is scary. I also want to echo what Councilmember Stewart said. I went to the Redmond joint meeting as well, and I walked out of that room with very deep sadness that all that building they did not have deeper affordability. It was just made me so sad, and that opportunity is lost. And so having a chance to build it in, even if it doesn't get built now or anytime soon, but having it in and ready, years from now, we would look back and be glad we did that.
Hi. Thank you. I would love to see this resolution on 21 November. Thanks.
Well, I thank you for asking. I'm a yes. I want to see, and I take on board all the concerns, particularly Chair Bach, when you were saying that you're concerned about it maybe getting a little out of control, and I think that's a legitimate concern. So it'd be interesting to see when it comes back on the 24th, the scope of work, because I know you're going to say, this is exactly what we're going to study. This is what we're going to study. This is how much it's going to cost. And if you want to do more studying, this is how much more it's going to cost. So that I'm interested in seeing, and I think that will help us put some guardrails up there, and it'll be defined, and it will be costed out, and that's what I want to see. I'm going to go back and rewatch this particular meeting again, because I know we've gotten like a bucket full of information tonight, and this is a hugely important subject. I'm really interested in seeing how we can get as much affordable housing as we can for the city. I keep hearing that from residents on countless occasions that they're concerned about affordable housing. I've been hearing from people that they couldn't afford their house today if they were buying it. So that's a lot of feedback I'm hearing from people, and we have to respond to that. We have to respond to that in some kind of a meaningful way, and not just keep thinking, well, we'll deal with that next year, the year after. We may miss our opportunity, and I hear when you were saying that, and I do not want to miss an opportunity to tackle a problem that is as big as it is, because it's a national, if not an international-wide problem. We do not have enough housing for all our people, and that shouldn't stand. So for the want of doing a little bit of work and spending a little bit of extra money. So I look forward to it coming back to us see the scope of work, seeing the cost behind it, and then we'll go from there. So yes, please.
Do we have anyone else? Okay. That was done 2 hours ago, so we're fine. Yeah. All right. If there's not anything, thank you. Are you staying on for the 3rd?
Kelly will be departing.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
yes.
I just wanted to say before I do depart, thank you for all the amazing feedback. This actually helps us bring a more focused resolution and scope of work back to you again, to discuss and consider before giving us that final direction. So we just really appreciate the time with all of you tonight. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. So I think, David, to you, and then Miriam Block Party Leitner as well. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. David Pyle, Department of Community Development. Tonight, we have as the 3rd agenda item for the joint meeting with the Planning Commission, the 2024 docket review. And this is just an overview of applications received. There will be further meetings on the topic, and I'm sure that Miriam Leitner and Jackie Balil will be telling us more about that process. And I see Jackie ready to go. Hi, Jackie.
Hello, thank you, David. Let me just get my screen shared here. Please let me know if you cannot see my screen.
We can see your screen. Thank you.
You. All right, good evening, City Council and Planning Commission. My name is Jackie Balil, and I'm a management analyst for community development. And tonight we are starting the review of the 2024 docket requests. This meeting is just meant to be informational and be a general overview of the 2 requests that were submitted this year. We'll start with a quick review of the amendment process to provide context before we actually move on to this year's requests. As you know, Sammamish operates under the Growth Management Act, or GMA, which is a state law which mandates coordinated and planned growth in land use planning. On the screen, you see 14 goals of the GMA. These goals feed into the required and optional elements for each city's comprehensive plans. The comprehensive plan, along with state and federal regulations, are what guide the development of our code, including the development regulations. The annual docket determines the list of items that will go through review by Planning Commission and City Council as possible amendments to the comprehensive plan or the development regulations. The annual docket process allows 2 types of amendments to be proposed. There are text amendments to change the text of the comprehensive plan or the development regulations in the municipal code, and there are also site-specific land use map amendments. This year's docket requests were both text amendments, so we will set aside the site-specific land use map amendment type. Quickly, I'll just go through the key dates for this year's docket review and then review the criteria we'll ask you to consider when thinking about the docket requests. So the first step in the process is deciding which proposals should be put on the docket for consideration in 2024. After tonight's joint informational session, the Planning Commission will have a public hearing and be asked to make a recommendation to City Council on November 2nd. And City Council will have a public hearing and a resolution to set the docket on December 5th this year. Staff will make recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council that will be shared during these meetings in November and December. And then any docketed items will be considered in 2024 during legislative review of the individual proposals. There are important criteria to consider when reviewing potential docket items. Those criteria are: how do the docket requests align with the staff work plan items? Is there a budget to complete the work? Is there staff availability to complete a full review of the requests? And are the proposals consistent with current policies and priorities? Again, tonight is just informational, so there's no decisions being made. We just want to keep these criteria in mind as we move forward. And per Title 24A, the staff recommendation will evaluate each request based on these criteria. We'll take a look at the requests received this year. I'll give an overview of the requests submitted. Please note the entire project narrative for both requests can be found in tonight's agenda packet. And we do encourage everyone to read these narratives as they were submitted. They were written by the applicants. The first proposal is a text amendment request submitted by the Eastman Development LLC to amend Land Use Goals 3 and 3.2 of the Sammamish Comprehensive Plan to include the creation of a new Eastlake neighborhood sub-area. Again, the full project narrative and description of the proposed amendment is on page 20 of tonight's packet. The second proposal is a text amendment request submitted by the Lake Washington School District to amend the Transfer of Development Rights chapter of the Sammamish Development Code to incorporate receiving site incentives from a sending site not currently identified in subsection 2 of the receiving site incentives table. The proposed text amendment will outline TDR-based incentives for TCA sending zones to TCB receiving zones, including a determination of the number of dwelling units to be calculated or square feet of additional commercial development to be allowed. Again, the full project narrative and description can be found on page 23 of tonight's agenda packet, and I would encourage everyone to read the full narrative. The public comment period for this year's docket request was open on September 19th and will actually close tonight at midnight. So if you're interested in providing comments, please, the link to view the request or to provide public comment is on the 2023 annual docket page of the city website. Staff's job during this time is to make sure you have all the information that you need to make a decision at the upcoming public hearings. So please ask questions tonight or reach out later, and we'll work to get your questions answered. If I don't have the answer at the time, we can get an answer back to you. So thank you for your time tonight. So if you have questions right now, we'd be happy to take those.
I'm not seeing any names turned yet. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, can we change the names? Since the piece of property next to the Lake Washington School is Eastlake, and the Eastman one is tongue-in-cheek, but it is kind of confusing. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I got it right. Yeah.
I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you, Jackie. So the public comment just on the 2 are due tonight, and then the public hearing is with Planning Commission first, then to us. Councilmember Howe, go ahead.
Just quickly, do you have much comment? Public comment at this
Good
time?
question. I would actually have to check. It's through a job form submitted on the city website. So I can take a look and see if there have been comments submitted so far. We normally would just check at the deadline. Miriam has her hand raised. She might know that.
So far, we have not gotten any comments that we know of. So we'll see what comes in, as Jackie was saying, by the deadline. And if we do get comments, those will be included in the public hearing agenda packet for Planning Commission as well as City Council.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Jackie and Miriam and David. I'm not seeing anything else. Go ahead, Scott.
Mayor, if I may, before Jackie and Miriam jump off, I'm going to ask David to do his normal update that's a little later in the agenda, actually right now, since they're both still on the call. David, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I will say Saturday was one of the most fun events, the Sammamish Block Party. Just as David finds his notes, it was so much fun. My favorite was the balloon animals popping and then all the children crying right after. It was like terrible. No, it was really, really good. Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, really good food, really great little ice cream truck. It was so fun.
So fun.
All right, so I can move through this pretty quickly to get to the fun part. This is our update number 10 on major planning projects. As you can see, there are quite a few meetings on the horizon. I've listed them here. Just want people to be aware of what's coming up through December related to our comprehensive plan update, our climate action plan development, and our critical areas update. The October 3rd meeting listed here is tonight. The comprehensive plan, we're finalizing land use and housing strategies. They must align with the 2024 comprehensive plan with a growth target of 2,100 units, pending direction from this evening. We're queuing up the commission and council review of different elements. We're working through finalization of relevant plan updates, such as the PROS plan by Parks. And we will be having a Saturday workshop on the all things comprehensive plan on October 21st. It's a really important meeting for us because we'll be able to combine all of the boards and commissions and the council and basically account for what would be almost a dozen meetings in one day. These are the dates for the comprehensive plan that are shown here. October 21st would be the joint meeting or the work session, I guess. November 2nd will be a planning commission meeting on the docket. November 16th will be the PROS plan. And again, on December 7th will be the public hearing for the Parks PROS plan. Climate action plan, we're in review of comment received since publication of the draft climate action plan and making final edits. There's an upcoming public hearing with the Planning Commission on October 12th. They'll be transmitting the document to City Council. We'll be having a work session and public hearing with the City Council scheduled for November 8th and December 5th. And background work is underway to create a sustainability commission as well. These are the dates to look forward to. October 12th, public hearing with the Planning Commission. November 8th, City Council meeting, where there'll be a work session on it. And then December 5th, we have a scheduled public hearing on the Climate Action Plan and potentially adoption, if all goes well. Critical areas update, you heard about this tonight. We're finalizing and publishing the gap analysis and all the background information, assessing where policy and code changes are needed to respond to gaps and updated best available science. And we're working on targeted outreach on areas of special focus. These are the meetings related to critical areas. It's this evening. You won't be hearing about critical areas for a little while we work on the areas of special focus and get the documents out there and really do some of the more background work on that. With that, this is the fun part, the block party readout. We had around 300 to 400 attendees, 50 staff and volunteers made the event work. That doesn't mean just on that one day. It was leading up to that, all the people involved. There were lots of smiling children and wonderful opportunities to connect. One of the things I liked most about it was getting to see all the families that came out. It was really fun. Just some photos of the event. I think this was a big hit with the kids. It always is. So You could see that it was full, but it wasn't overcrowded, which was essential. There was a steady flow of people through the event, and I literally started talking when it opened and didn't stop talking to people until it closed. Here we have a booth. This is our Sustain Sammamish, big attraction. It was next to my booth. I got to watch them have more fun because they had the attractive wheel. We had models of houses, which were great, but
David, the models were great, but I have to say they were giving out trees, which they collected from the public right of way, 100 trees. I was so impressed by that. That was amazing. And I saw families coming out with 1 or 2 trees under their arms to take them home to plant. It was amazing. It was wonderful.
Altogether, it was a great event. We had a debrief today on it to talk about what we learned from it, and we're hopeful to try to recreate this in the future. We felt like it was a great opportunity to connect with the community, so thank you for all your support, and thank you for those of you who judged our booths, although you didn't vote for ours, so.
David, I think one of the questions that came out was who won?
It was
Sustain.
Well, no, it was Avril. It was Avril.
It was the shrimp. So just her
Yep.
specifically. Yeah. That is true. I thought they had like a super booth.
But they had the double wide booth, yeah.
So they sort of cheated.
But I did note that all the other booths had been taken down and packed up, and theirs was still standing at the end. So the complexity of the setup resulted in more work to take it down.
Yes, thank you. And thank you again to everyone who planned and helped with that. It was so fun. Really, really good event. Do we have anything else before we end this part?
No, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, again, say a huge thank you to Miriam, who was the ringleader of all this. I know there's a lot of work that went in with her, but if you ever get a chance, and I'm happy to share it out, Miriam's step-by-step instructions for everyone is pretty incredible. It's about Miriam, did it stop at 12 pages, or did it increase beyond that at the final draft,
I think it's about 12, but then I was going to make a follow-up so you could get the actual result of it.
Councilmember Stewart.
I just wanted to share so everybody can hear this. I actually received a piece of feedback from someone there who said that they work with a lot of municipalities and that by far, hands down, we have the best staff, that we have the hardest working, most innovative staff that they've ever worked with in the region. So I just wanted to share that with everybody here and make sure the public could hear that.
Well, if I may, Mayor, I just, on a final note, I know council had challenged us to try to find more creative ways to engage with the community. And so I really do want to thank Miriam and David and the team for finding a way to get people out that in numbers that we haven't really seen before, unless we're doing something that people really don't like. So to have them come to something that's a fun event and get those kinds of numbers without setting off fireworks is a true testament to a job well done. So thank you to the team.
Great, thank you again, and thank you, Planning Commission. Sounds like we're going to see you on the 21st, if not before. And then is like 15 minutes enough? Okay, so 15 minutes. So let's just do 8:30. Council will be back to start. Does that sound good? I'm looking at you squinting at your phone. Okay, yeah, good. All right.
That sounds great.
All right, thank you to the commission. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are now starting our meeting. We are going to start with public comment. So, Mary?
Hi, this is Mary Wichter. I've been in Sammamish 23 years. First of all, I wanted to say the block party on Saturday was absolutely stunning. They even had a steep slopes vegetated, just bark. And then, don't know if you saw that, but it was really good. And then the little shrimp thing was about how the wetlands work. So that was awesome. In fact, I just listened to the Kokanee work group from last October where they talked about all that and writing that up. It's so important. Anyway, sensitive areas, environmentally sensitive areas, those were discovered in 1990 and required from the Clean Water Act back in 1972, so this information's been available for a long time. They now no longer call it environmentally sensitive, they call it critical areas. So the maps, excuse me, the maps I pass out are not my maps. They're usually the city's maps. I have done a few things to mark them up. So a couple meetings ago, I gave you from the comprehensive plan, the current one, that we finally got that little legend on there for steep slopes. Took 3 years to get a legend on a map. It says steep slopes in gray, and it says the natural features influence land use, steep slopes and wetlands limit development potential. The problem is if you're not recognizing the steep slopes or if you don't have strong enough code, you're developing on them. That's a little bit about the end of my discussion here today. I also printed for you the geohazards. So this is the steep slope hazard. This is the erosion in orange, the landslide in dark red, and then the seismic really just runs along the lake, which is why I wrote in my email today. Shoreline is pretty similar to critical areas, but they're in different parts of the code, but the seismic is being on there, so you do need to know that. And then if you look at this, the whole map, the only place where there's dark red, which is landslide, and there's not orange, which is erosion, is this area here where I happen to live in Tamarack. I'm not up here just because I'm crazy or I want to have a voice. I'm here because there's actual problems, like the erosion code is stronger than the landslide code, so we were really overlooked. So in here, this was a blow up from a map the city did they had 5 emergency surface water ordinances. This is Tamarack, so it's this little bridge area, this red area here, the dark red area. It's blown up, and you can see the yellow is steep slopes, which is from the gray thing, and then the blue is landslide. And I just wanted everybody to know that so that you have your maps. I think they're way easier to look at, and I do have different PDFs from either online at the city or from public records request. And then this is the same map as this, it's just in different colors. This is from the Sammamish property tool. So the orange is what the dark red would be, landslide. And I went through King County Parcel Viewer and researched, these are all the houses that tried to build. There's 13 of them, lucky 13. They tried to build, they didn't build, they foreclosed twice, they sold for less. They took 10 to 15 years to build, they still have problems. I know you guys are worried about losing those few trees in town center, but gosh, one less than 11,000 square foot lot in Tamarack and steep slopes, people are taking out 48 trees to build one house. That's why we need TDRs. We need to get it off those areas. We need to get it in town center.
Thank you.
Please give Lake Washington more for their TDRs and their request for the docket, and I also support that.
Thank you. All right. James? All righty. Online?
If you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand. If calling by phone, press star 9. We have no public commenters online. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Next up, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions on that one? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, 7-0, that passes. Next, we have 2 proclamations. I will start with the Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas every 14 seconds throughout the world, a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer, and breast cancer is the most common cancer among American women after non-melanoma skin cancer. And in 2023, an estimated 298,000 women and 2,800 men will be diagnosed with breast cancer. And through research and advocacy, significant advances have been made in the fight against breast cancer, including an increase in 5-year relative survival rates for localized breast cancer from 74% to 98%. And there are more than 4 million survivors living in the U.S. today who are a testament to the courage, as well as the importance of promoting awareness about breast cancer, providing information, funding research, following recommended screening guidelines, and offering treatment to those who are affected. And screening rates are declining, and a recent study reveals that among the 1.5 million women studied over age 40 with health insurance, less than 50% received the recommended annual screening, and various organizations are spreading breast cancer awareness to both women and men through outreach, education, and screening programs, and have empowered women with the life-saving message of early detection and the importance of having annual mammograms. And throughout the month of October, women are encouraged to make renewed commitment to following recommended screening guidelines, make a mammogram appointment, and promote awareness about breast cancer and proper breast health. month. And the City of Sammamish would like to support and encourage those ongoing efforts on behalf of our community, and public officials and residents of the city are urged to observe this month with appropriate activities and programs that encourage annual mammograms and continued support by promoting awareness and getting involved. Now, therefore, it be resolved that I, Mayor Kaylee Clark, on behalf of Sammamish City Council, do hereby proclaim October 2023 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Sammamish. All right, and then we have Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Councilmember Howe.
Proclamation, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Whereas nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner, which equates to more than 10 million women and men within a year. And whereas 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. And whereas on a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. And in just one day across the U.S. and its territories, nearly 75,000 victims of domestic violence seek services from domestic violence programs and shelters. And whereas the impact of domestic violence is wide-ranging, directly affecting individuals and society as a whole, here in this community and throughout the United States and in the world, and whereas racism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, and discrimination based on physical ability, nationality, or other factors help to perpetuate domestic violence and make finding safety even more difficult for some victims. And whereas the need for safe houses continues to be rated as survivors' most urgent need, and whereas Sammamish joins others across Washington and the nation in supporting victims of domestic violence, as well as local programs, state coalitions, national organizations, and other agencies nationwide who are committed to increasing public awareness of domestic violence and sending a clear message to abusers that domestic violence is not tolerated in Sammamish, and that whereas domestic violence impacts millions of people each year, but it can be prevented. Preventing domestic violence requires the collective voice and power of individuals, families, institutions, and systems, each of whose resiliency adds a valuable and powerful component to transforming our communities. And now, therefore, Kaylee Clark, Mayor of the City of Sammamish, on behalf of the City Council, hereby proclaims October 2023 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Great, thank you so much. All right, it looks like we have back to unfinished business. So we had David give his update. Now we're moving to Anjali for the approval of the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center natatorium tile replacement project. Yeah, and this is for an approval of additional funds. So of course we've already approved this, but we have more information.
Give us a moment here, Council, while we have our team get promoted, and then they will speak to the item in front of you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, Mr. City Manager. Your next topic is the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center natatorium tile replacement project. And I'm going to turn this over to Kevin Teague, our Deputy Director, to give the presentation.
Thank you, Anjali, and Madam Mayor and City Council. For the record, my name is Kevin Teague. I am the Deputy Director for Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. With me tonight, we also have Sevda Baran, our Senior Project Manager, and we are here to discuss the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center, also known as the YMCA tile replacement project budget. So if you recall, in May of this year, Council approved a memorandum of understanding with the YMCA that discussed how we would work together to complete this necessary tile replacement project. It outlined that the Y would manage the project and take the lead, and it provided the terms of that arrangement. In October of last year, almost exactly a year ago tonight, City Council authorized $900,000 for the tile replacement project. And then earlier this fall, the YMCA has put the project out to bid. We have two objectives tonight. First is to update Council on the bids that were received and the timing of the project. And then secondly, to request authorization for additional funds for the tile portion of the project. Just a very quick reminder of the history of this tile issue, because I know that you all have heard this before, but the tile failure was discovered during the warranty period after the original construction of the YMCA was completed. In 2020, the city filed a lawsuit, and in 2022, the city received a settlement in the amount of $500,000. From there, ARC architects were hired to design a repair and replacement plan. And in August, bids were received for the project. Also this fall, we received notice that the city would be awarded a King County Aquatics Facilities grant to help pay for this tile repair project. The grant amount is $223,165. The tile repair will occur over all of the tile in the aquatics area, what's known as the natatorium, and will be done in 2 phases. This will allow one of the pools to be open, to remain open at all times. The bids came in higher than expected. We think primarily due to increases in material cost, as well as the difficulty of working within an occupied space. When the design fees are factored in, the total project cost, including a 10% contingency, is $1,441,916, which is $541,916 above what was authorized by council. I'd like to mention again that the city did receive $500,000 in the lawsuit settlement, as well as the city will be receiving the King County Aquatics Facilities grant to help offset these costs. Lastly, and before I leave the construction budget slide, I wanted to mention that this project is being paid for out of the Park CIP fund, which is how the original Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center was paid for, and that this is not funded from the city's general fund. There are, and just so that you know, that there are adequate funds within the Park CIP fund to cover this overage. With the transition of having the project managed by the YMCA, the schedule has adjusted a little bit, with the work starting this fall and then finishing up next spring. So to summarize, we are requesting the additional authorization of $545,000 for the Aquatic Center tile replacement project. And I'm happy to answer any questions for council. We did prepare a motion, and I have that on the next slide if you all choose to move forward with this. So with that, I'll open it up for your questions, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Oh no, I don't have names. Councilmember O'Farrell.
I just had a quick question about, you said that the YMCA are going to be overseeing, being the project management on this project. Do we have any oversee or any input in the overseeing of this project as a result of that? Will we get to take a look at the work and sign off on it and to our, it's to our standard, et cetera? What kind of input will we have on that?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. SEBDA will remain our project manager from the city side and will be very involved. This is outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding. So the city will be inspecting all along the way, and additionally, in addition to the city, the architect who designed the repair for this, they will also be very actively involved in the construction administration.
Councilmember Howe?
With being involved with the construction is one thing, but would that person have noticed, for example, that the tiles were improperly put into their mortar, their foundation?
Right.
I don't know that they would have noticed something like that. So I guess my question is centered around for the winning bid company, do they have sufficient means to
stay in business? Can we sue them if it doesn't work like it's supposed to? I mean, this is why we're in the boat we're in, is because the contractor before failed us and then managed to glide out of business. So I'm trying to avoid that in the future if that's at all possible. I'm assuming that that was looked into to some extent.
Yes, absolutely. And we know that the tiles failed because the proper expansion joints were not installed. And that was after careful research by the architecture team that SEBDA worked with through the whole process of evaluating the tile. They are the ones that discovered that was the issue, and that is probably foremost on everyone's mind on how we can best make sure that the fix is something that is a long-term solution and not something that's going to occur again. We do have provisions from the Memorandum of Understanding that require that the city sign off on work at the same time that the YMCA is signing off on that. So work will not be completed without our inspection of that, in addition to the YMCA and the consulting architect, ARC.
So I believe you mentioned that you thought that the overage was due to the cost of supplies. Am I correct?
I think it's a number of things. I mean, the cost we have seen a significant increase in materials. I think also the difficulty of working in an occupied space. As I mentioned, they're going to do it in a two-phase plan so that there will be a pool open. So therefore, you're going to have construction and people coming in and out. So they'll have to cordon off the areas, and that definitely adds to the cost and complication.
Because part of my question also stems from, based on the other committees that I'm on, we're seeing overages in virtually everything. And so, yes, it is supply chain. Yes, it is materials. It is also fewer contractors that are willing to step up and actually do this work because they're already engaged. So that's another problem. I'm curious, if you have seen the same thing, and do you think we need to extend the length of time in which these contracts can be applied to so that we could actually get more people into the pool?
I like that. I like what you did there. Hey, SEBDA, how many? Do you recall how many bidders we had on the project?
We had 6 bidders.
Oh, that's actually pretty good.
On the bidders.
That's
Yeah,
actually pretty
we had
good.
a walkthrough. There was over 40 people.
So there was a lot of interest in the project, but I think you're right, Councilman Member Howe, that their contractors are being more selective, and prices are indicating, we're seeing higher prices because of that.
Yeah, I don't know how we solve for this, but as a council, we really need to somehow get a grip on where we think these numbers are going to come in at, so that we're not surprised by by overages that have so many zeros attached to them. So I know that that's a problem that we all own, but it's something I'm very aware of, and it's everybody. It's everybody I'm working with right now has the same problem.
Councilmember Indapure.
Thank you, Mayor. So along the same lines, I just had a quick question on, so I saw in the memo that we had estimated, or the Parks Commission had requested $900,000 in the budget. And I just wanted to understand, I think whenever you bring a budget forward, or I'm sure when we had this item discussed previously, you have a slide which shows contingency and, typically 10% contingency. So did that 900,000 include that 10% contingency at that time, or afterwards, if you've shared these numbers? Just wanted to understand that and sort of related to the actual bid that has come.
The 900,000 that was originally requested did include a contingency, and like I mentioned earlier, the bids just came in higher than our estimate.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, or would anyone like to make the motion? Deputy Mayor Lamb, your light is on, so I'll let you do it.
Oh, it is
Yeah,
on?
yeah, hot mic.
Oh. I motion to authorize an additional $545,000 from the Parks Capital Improvement Fund be allocated to the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center tile replacement project.
Second. All right, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All righty. Thank you all. Thanks for staying on with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, then I will move to city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we covered it earlier with the readout on the block party. Again, want to thank the community for coming out and joining us, and hopefully they enjoyed the event. And again, want to thank all of our staff for putting that on. I think it was a great event, and hopefully we can learn from that and improve our events as we move forward. So that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank the Parks team for working with council on the Beaton Hill Nature Path. I walked on it a couple of days ago, and it's really such a great path to get people off the road, and it connects, the top of near 4th Street down to Big Rock Park. So I'm really happy to see that available for the public. And I also noted that the city will be participating in the Sammamish Climate Challenge along with other East Side cities. And this is an online platform where residents in the community can measure their environmental impact. So there will be more to come in our communication, in newsletters and social media on how we can participate, or how residents can participate. And we do have a goal, so we will be trying to get every resident to join this program. Thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And I just wanted to say on Saturday, October 7th, we have the grand opening of the East Lake Sammamish Trail. So between Redmond and Issaquah is completed. So Saturday at noon, it'll be the area just like by the Whole Foods parking lot. So you could probably even park in Whole Foods. And it's going to be like a 2-hour event with booths and fun things. So definitely come. Super exciting. All right. If nothing else, want to go ahead, Councilmember Howe?
Oh, I'll do it. I move to adjourn. There we go.
Okay. Second. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Thanks, everyone.